In the desolate Yorkshire moors, where shadows cling to the frost-bitten walls of Ravens End Manor, a single blood-stained scarf holds the key to a chilling mystery. Why did Sir Reginald Ashby vanish in the dead of night? Who among his family, his ambitious son, his secretive daughter-in-law, or the brooding estate manager hides a deadly truth? As Hercule Poirot steps into a web of blackmail, hidden passages, and a scandal that could shatter a legacy, one question burns. Will the killer strike again before the truth is unveiled? Unravel the secrets of betrayal and the suspenseful tale of deception, where every clue leads to a shocking revelation. Chapter 1. The invitation to Ravens End. The train rattled through the Yorkshire moors, its wheels clattering rhythmically against the frost-kissed tracks. Hercule Poirot, seated in the first-class carriage, adjusted his impeccable mustache. With a gloved finger, his sharp eyes scanning the desolate landscape, the moors stretched endlessly, a bleak tapestry of heather and gorse, shrouded in a mist that clung to the earth like a ghostly veil. It was November, and the chill seeped through the carriage window, though Poirot's neatly pressed suit and overcoat kept him impervious to the cold. In his hand was a telegram, its words brief yet intriguing, penned in the elegant script of Lady Eleanor Ashby. "M. Poirot, urgent. Your presence requested at Ravens End. Delicate family matter requires your discretion. Arrive soonest. E. Ashby." Poirot's little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, hummed with anticipation. A delicate family matter in a remote manor could only mean one thing: intrigue. And intrigue, for Hercule Poirot, was the spice of life. He had accepted the invitation without hesitation, though the details were sparse. Ravens End, he had learned from a brief inquiry, was the ancestral seat of the Ashby family, a crumbling yet majestic manor perched on the edge of a windswept cliff. The family was old, aristocratic, and, if rumors were to be believed, riddled with secrets. As the train slowed, Poirot tucked the telegram into his pocket and gathered his small, meticulously packed valise. The platform at Ravens End Halt was little more than a wooden board, slick with frost, flanked by a single lamppost that flickered weakly in the dusk. A tall, gaunt figure awaited him, dressed in a black overcoat that seemed to absorb the fading light. The man's face was stern, his eyes shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Monsieur Poirot?" the man asked, his voice low and precise, with the faintest trace of a Yorkshire accent. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, stepping onto the platform with a grace that belied the uneven boards. "And you are Mortimer, sir, butler to the Ashby family. Lady Eleanor sent me to fetch you?" Poirot nodded, noting the man's rigid posture and the way his gloved hands clasped tightly behind his back. Mortimer was not merely a servant. He carried himself with the air of one who knew more than he revealed. Without another word, the butler led Poirot to a waiting carriage, its black horses snorting clouds of steam into the frigid air. The ride to Ravens End was silent, save for the crunch of wheels on the frozen path and the occasional howl of the wind. The manor loomed into view as the carriage crested a hill, its silhouette stark against the bruised purple of the evening sky. Ravens End was a Gothic sprawl of turrets and gables, its stone walls weathered by centuries of storms. Ivy clung to its facade like skeletal fingers, and the tall windows glowed faintly, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets within. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. A house such as this, he thought, was built for drama. Mortimer led him through a heavy oak door into a grand foyer, where a chandelier cast flickering shadows across marble floors. The air smelled of old wood, wax, and something faintly metallic. Poirot's nose twitched, but he said nothing, allowing Mortimer to guide him down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashbys, their eyes seeming to follow his every step. In the drawing room, Lady Eleanor Ashby awaited. She stood by a roaring fire, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture regal despite the lines of strain etched into her face. Her gown, a deep emerald, shimmered in the firelight, and her eyes, sharp as cut glass, assessed Poirot. With a mixture of hope and wariness, Monsieur Poirot, she said, extending a hand adorned with a single sapphire ring. I am grateful you've come. I trust your journey was tolerable. Most tolerable, madam. Poirot replied, bowing slightly. But I confess, your telegram has piqued my curiosity. A delicate matter, you say. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, and she gestured for him to sit. The room was opulent yet oppressive, its heavy drapes and dark furniture absorbing the light. 3 others were present, and Poirot's eyes flicked over them, cataloging details with the precision of a watchmaker. A young man, perhaps in his early 30s, lounged in an armchair, his handsome face marred by a scowl. His suit was tailored, but a faint scratch on his hand caught Poirot's attention. The skin red and freshly broken, across from him sat a woman, her auburn hair cascading in waves, her eyes darting nervously between the others. Her dress was simple yet elegant, and her fingers twisted a handkerchief with quiet intensity. The third figure, a man with weathered features and a lean frame, stood near the window, his gaze fixed on the moors beyond. His rough hand suggested manual labor, yet his eyes held a keen intelligence. Allow me to introduce my family, Lady Eleanor said, her voice steady but laced with tension. My son, Charles Ashby, my daughter-in-law, Beatrice Ashby, and our estate manager, Thomas Blackwood. Poirot inclined his head to each, his smile polite but probing. Enchant. And the matter that requires Hercule Poirot, Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers brushing the sapphire ring. It concerns my brother-in-law, Sir Reginald Ashby. He disappeared last night. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Disappeared, madam? This is a word most vague. Pray, elaborate. She took a breath, her composure faltering. We were gathered for a family dinner, a rare occasion to discuss the estate's future. Reginald was here, in this very room, until just after midnight. He excused himself, saying he needed air. No one saw him leave the manor, but this morning he was gone. We searched the grounds, the house, everywhere. All we found was she paused, her voice dropping to a whisper, a scarf, stained with blood, in the library. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Blood, you say? And this scarf, it belonged to Sir Reginald? Yes, Charles interjected, his voice sharp. It was his favorite, monogrammed with his initials. But it doesn't mean he's dead. He could have cut himself, wandered off, Charles. Lady Eleanor said sharply, silencing him. Monsieur Poirot, I fear something terrible has happened. Reginald was not a man to vanish without reason. He was troubled lately. The estate's finances, family disputes. She trailed off, her eyes flicking to Beatrice, who looked away. Poirot leaned forward, his hands folded neatly. And these disputes, madam, they involved whom? Eleanor's lips pursed. Family matters, monsieur. Reginald and Charles had disagreements over money, mostly. And Beatrice, she stopped, as if catching herself. Beatrice's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing. I had nothing to do with it, Eleanor. You know that. Enough, Thomas Blackwood said, his voice low but firm. This isn't helping. Monsieur Poirot, what do you need to start? Poirot smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of his lips. I need, Monsieur Blackwood, to see this library, and the scarf. Then, perhaps, we shall begin to unravel this tangle. Mortimer led Poirot to the library, a cavernous room lined with bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling. A single window overlooked the moors, its panes rattling in the wind. In the center of the room, on a polished oak table, lay the scarf, silk affair, once cream, now marred by a dark, rust-colored stain. Poirot donned a pair of gloves and examined it closely, noting the monogrammed R.A. and the irregular edges of the stain, suggesting it had been crumpled rather than neatly folded. Curious, Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the room. The door was heavy, its lock intact, with no signs of tampering. A fireplace stood cold, its ashes undisturbed. A rug lay slightly askew, and Poirot bent to inspect it, his fingers brushing the edge. "Mortimer, this room wasn't locked when the scarf was found." "Yes, sir," Mortimer replied. "I unlocked it myself this morning, at Lady Eleanor's request." "And who has keys?" "Only myself and Lady Eleanor, sir." "Sir Reginald had one, but it's missing." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A locked room, a bloodied scarf, a missing man. The pieces were scattered, but already patterns emerged. He turned to the family, who had followed him into the library, their faces a study in tension. "Monsieur Charles," Poirot said, his tone mild but piercing. "This scratch on your hand, how did it come to be?" Charles blinked, his hand instinctively curling into a fist. "A gardening mishap. I was pruning roses yesterday." "Roses in November?" Poirot's eyebrows arched. "Most unusual." Charles flushed, but before he could respond, Beatrice spoke. "He's always in the garden, Monsieur Poirot. He finds it calming." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the way her eyes avoided Charles's. "And you, Madame Beatrice, where were you when Sir Reginald vanished?" "In my room," she said quickly. "I retired early." The dinner was tense. "Tense," Poirot repeated, savoring the word. "And you, Monsieur Blackwood?" "Checking the stables," Thomas said, his voice steady. "The horses were restless last night. Storm coming, you see." Poirot nodded, though his eyes betrayed nothing. He turned back to the scarf, his fingers tracing the air above it, as if coaxing secrets from the fabric. "This blood," he said, almost to himself. "It tells a story. But what story? We shall see." He straightened, his demeanor brisk. "I shall require a tour of the grounds, Mortimer, and interviews with the staff. Every detail, no matter how small, is of consequence." As the family dispersed, Poirot lingered in the library, his eyes drawn to a bookshelf that seemed slightly out of alignment. With a gentle push, he felt a click, and a panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in darkness. Dust motes danced in the faint light, and a cold draft carried the scent of damp stone. Poirot's lips curved into a smile. A secret passage. This was a house that kept its secrets close. He stepped into the passage, his polished shoes silent on the stone floor. The walls were rough, the air heavy with the weight of centuries. The passage twisted, descending slightly, until it opened into the snowy courtyard beyond. Poirot emerged, his breath clouding in the cold, and his eyes fell upon a set of footprints, fresh and distinct, leading toward the stables. They were deep, deliberate, as if made by someone in haste. Poirot knelt, examining the tracks. They were too large for a woman's shoe, too precise for a stumble. A man, then, and one who knew the grounds well. He followed them a few steps, noting how they curved around a stone wall before vanishing into the snow. The wind howled, erasing the edges of the prints, but Poirot's mind had already captured their shape. He stood, brushing snow from his coat, and glanced toward the stables, their dark silhouette looming in the distance. The little gray cells were at work, piecing together the fragments of this puzzle. A bloodied scarf, a locked room, a secret passage, and now footprints in the snow. Sir Reginald Ashby had not simply vanished. He had been taken, or he had fled. But why, and by whom? The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone in the courtyard, the wind tugging at his scarf, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The mystery of Raven's Inn had begun, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until every secret was laid bare. Chapter 2. The locked room. The wind howled through the Yorkshire moors, rattling the ancient windows of Raven's Inn as Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his keen eyes scanning the room where Sir Reginald Ashby's blood-stained scarf had been found. The air was thick with the scent of old books and polished wood, but beneath it lingered a faint metallic tang, a reminder of the mystery that had drawn him here. The room was locked from the inside when the scarf was discovered, the heavy oak door unyielding, its brass key still in place. No windows were open, No signs of forced entry marred the walls, and yet the scarf crimson with dried blood lay crumpled on the Persian rug, a silent accusation. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with a challenge. How had the culprit entered and exited a locked room, and what had become of Sir Reginald? Poirot began his investigation with meticulous care, his gloved hands tracing the edges of the doorframe, searching for hidden mechanisms. The lock was intact, the key stiff but functional. Ruling out tampering, he turned his attention to the room itself, a cavernous space lined with towering bookshelves, their leather-bound volumes gleaming in the flickering light of a single chandelier. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold, the ashes undisturbed. A mahogany desk stood in the corner, cluttered with papers, a crystalline quell, and a silver letter opener, its blade curiously clean despite the bloodied scarf. Poirot's gaze lingered on the rug, where the scarf had been found near a velvet armchair. The fibers beneath were slightly compressed, suggesting someone had stood there for some time. Perhaps watching. Waiting. He summoned Charles Ashby, Lady Eleanor's ambitious son, whose scratched hand had caught Poirot's attention the previous night. Charles entered, his tailored suit impeccable but his eyes darting nervously, betraying a man ill at ease. "Monsieur Ashby," Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk, "this scratch on your hand. It is most curious. You say it was a gardening mishap, yet your hands, they are not those of a man who toils in the earth." Charles flushed, his fingers twitching as he adjusted his cufflinks. "I was pruning roses yesterday," he insisted. "Caught my hand on a thorn. Nothing more." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "And yet, the roses in the garden, they are dormant in this winter frost. Curious, is it not?" Charles's jaw tightened, but he offered no reply, his silence louder than words. Next, Poirot questioned Beatrice, Sir Reginald's enigmatic daughter-in-law, whose delicate features masked a sharp intellect. She glided into the library, her emerald dress catching the light, her composure faltering only when Poirot mentioned the scarf. "It was Reginald's," she confirmed, her voice low. "He always wore it, a gift from his late wife." When pressed about the night of the disappearance, she revealed a crucial detail. Sir Reginald and Charles had argued heatedly in the drawing room over the estate's finances. Reginald was furious, she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. He accused Charles of mismanaging funds, of risking the family's legacy. It was intense. Poirot noted her hesitation, sensing she withheld more than she shared. "And you, madam, where were you when this argument took place?" Beatrice's lips parted, then closed. "In my room," she said finally, reading. The interviews deepened the mystery, but the room itself held more secrets. Poirot knelt by the fireplace, his fingers brushing the stone surround. A faint draft caught his attention, cool air seeping from a crack in the masonry. With careful pressure, he tested the stones, and one shifted slightly, revealing a hidden panel. It opened with a soft click, exposing a narrow passage barely wide, enough for a man to pass through. The walls were rough-hewn, the air damp and stale, suggesting long disuse. Poirot's torch illuminated cobwebs and dust, but also faint scuff marks on the floor recent, perhaps from the night of the disappearance. The passage wound through the manor's thick walls, descending slightly before emerging into the snowy courtyard near the stables. Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on the frost, and immediately noticed a set of fresh footprints leading toward the stables. Half obscured by the morning's light snow, the footprints were a revelation, suggesting an escape route unnoticed by the household. Poirot followed them, his mind racing. The prints were deep, deliberate, the stride of someone moving with purpose, not haste. They veered toward the stables, a low stone building where the Ashby family kept their horses. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of hay and leather. Thomas Blackwood, the brooding estate manager, was there, polishing a bridle with slow, methodical strokes. His dark eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of unease. Monsieur Blackwood. Poirot said, "These footprints, they lead to your domain. Were you here last night? Perhaps." Thomas's hand stilled. "I was in my quarters," he said gruffly. "Saw nothing, heard nothing." But Poirot's gaze fell on a muddy boot in the corner, its tread suspiciously similar to the prints. "Outside. We shall see," Poirot murmured, his tone light but his eyes sharp. As he examined the stables, Poirot noticed a stack of hay bales, slightly askew, as if recently moved. Behind them, he found a small trapdoor, barely visible beneath. The straw, it led to a shallow cellar, empty save for a single lantern, its wick still warm. Someone had been here recently, perhaps hiding, perhaps watching. Poirot's mind turned to the locked room. The secret passage explained how the culprit could have entered and exited without disturbing the door. But the lantern suggested a more recent presence. Had someone returned to cover their tracks? Or was another plot unfolding within Raven's Inn, returning to the library? Poirot re-examined the scarf, noting its frayed edges and the uneven bloodstains. The blood was concentrated at one end, as if used to wipe a blade or a wound. He tested the letter opener on the desk, but its pristine condition ruled it out as the source. The papers on the desk, however, offered a new clue, a ledger detailing the estate's finances, with entries circled in red ink indicating discrepancies. Charles's name appeared frequently, alongside sums that suggested embezzlement. Poirot's suspicions deepened had Sir Reginald discovered his son's misdeeds, leading to a fatal confrontation. He summoned Mortimer, the butler, whose stern demeanor masked a wealth of knowledge about the manor. "This passage?" Poirot asked, pointing to the hidden panel. "It is known to the household." Mortimer's lips thinned. "It's an old secret, sir, from the days of the first Lord Ashby, used for discreet exits during troubled times. Few know of it now." Poirot pressed further. "And who among the family might know?" Mortimer hesitated. "Lady Eleanor, perhaps. And Master Charles," he explored the manor as a boy. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. The passage was a key, but the motive remained elusive as evening fell. Poirot walked the courtyard, retracing the footprints. They ended abruptly, near a stone bench, as if the person had paused, perhaps to meet someone. The snow around the bench was disturbed, suggesting a scuffle. Poirot's torch caught a glint of metal cufflink, engraved with the Ashby crest. Half buried in the frost, it matched the pair Charles had worn that morning. Confronted with the evidence, Charles grew pale, his earlier bravado crumbling. "I was in the courtyard," he admitted, "but only to clear my head after the argument. I didn't see father after that." His voice cracked, but Poirot sensed a half-truth, a thread yet to be unraveled. The chapter drew to a close as Poirot stood alone in the courtyard, the wind tugging at his coat. The footprints, the passage, the cufflink all pointed to a calculated act. But the why and the how remained shrouded. The manor's secrets were layered, each revelation peeling back only part of the truth as the stars emerged above the moors. Poirot's gaze fixed on the stables, where the lantern's warmth lingered in his memory. Someone was watching, waiting, and Poirot knew the next clue would lead him deeper into the heart of Raven's End's darkness. "Monsieur, mesdames," Poirot began, "the disappearance of Sir Reginald is no accident. The footprints, the passage, the letters, they point to a truth hidden within these walls. Someone in this room knows more than they say. I ask you, now, what secret does this family guard?" Charles's face reddened. "This is absurd. I've told you. I argued with my uncle, but I didn't harm him. The scratch is from gardening, nothing more." Beatrice's voice was soft but sharp. "And I've said all I know." Reginald was troubled, but he never spoke of blackmail. Thomas remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot's gaze lingered on each of them, his mind assembling the puzzle. The letters were the key, but their author, V, remained a shadow. The broken ice suggested a struggle or an attempt to hide. Evidence. The button, the footprints, the cloaked figure all were pieces, but the picture was incomplete. As the family dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes drawn to the fireplace. A faint scent of charred paper caught his attention. He knelt, sifting through the ashes, and found a fragment of a letter. Its edges burned, but a few words legible. Must pay, or all will know. It matched the handwriting of the blackmail letters. He straightened, his mind racing. Someone had tried to destroy evidence, but they had been careless. The fragment was a clue, but it also confirmed his suspicion. The blackmailer was close, perhaps within the manor itself, and the pawn, with its broken ice, held more secrets yet. Poirot stepped into the night, the cold biting at his face. He returned to the pawn, now illuminated by lanterns as the groundsmen continued their work. One of them approached, his face grim. "Mr. Poirot, we found something else, caught in the reeds." He held out a sodden glove, its leather fine but stained with mud and what appeared to be blood. Poirot examined it, noting a monogrammed R.A. stitched into the cuff. Sir Reginald Ashby's glove, no doubt. But the blood, was it his or another's? The chapter closed with Poirot standing by the pawn, the glove in his hand, the letters in his pocket, and the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The shadows in the snow were growing longer, but Hercule Poirot was not a man to be deterred. The truth, he knew, was near hidden in the lies, the secrets, and the betrayals of Raven's End. Chapter 3. Shadows in the snow. The Yorkshire moors stretched out before Raven's End like a frozen sea, their undulating hills cloaked in a thin veneer of snow that glittered under the weak winter sun. Hercule Poirot, bundled in his heavy overcoat and muffler, stood at the edge of the courtyard, his sharp eyes tracing the faint footprints that led from the secret passage's exit toward the stables. The discovery of the passage had set his little gray cells alight, for it suggested a cunning mind at work, someone who knew the manor's hidden veins and had used them to slip away unnoticed. The footprints, crisp and deliberate in the fresh snow, were his next clue. A silent whisper of the truth buried beneath the icy surface. Poirot followed the trail, his polished boots crunching softly as he moved with purpose. The air was sharp, biting at his mustache, but his focus remained unshaken. The footprints were uneven, suggesting haste or perhaps a burden carried, perhaps Sir Reginald himself, alive or otherwise. The trail veered slightly, skirting the edge of a low stone wall that separated the manor's formal gardens from the wilder grounds beyond. As he rounded the wall, Poirot's gaze fell upon the frozen pond, its surface a dull mirror reflecting the gray sky above. The footprints stopped abruptly at the pond's edge, as if the one who made them had vanished into the ether. He knelt, inspecting the snow. The tracks did not double back, nor did they diverge to another path. It was as if the figure had simply ceased to exist. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. Such mysteries were the lifeblood of his craft. He scanned the pond's edge, noting a faint disturbance in the snow, a scuff mark that suggested a stumble or a sudden halt. His eyes narrowed as they caught a subtle irregularity, a patch of ice. Near the bank was cracked, its edges jagged and glistening with fresh frost. Something or someone had broken through. Poirot rose, brushing snow from his gloves, and turned his attention to the stables. A low stone building nestled against a copse of skeletal trees. The footprints had led him here, and though they ended at the pond, the stables were the logical destination. He approached cautiously, his senses attuned to the smallest detail, the creak of a shutter in the wind, the faint whinny of a horse within. The stable doors were slightly ajar, and a thin ribbon of warmth spilled out, carrying the scent of hay and leather dot inside. Poirot found Thomas Blackwood, the estate manager, standing near a workbench, his broad hands methodically polishing a hunting rifle. The man's dark eyes flicked up as Poirot entered, and for a moment, a shadow of unease crossed his weathered face before he masked it with a nod. "Monsieur Blackwood." Poirot greeted, his tone polite but probing. It is a fine morning for such work, none, though perhaps an unusual hour to be tending to a rifle. Thomas set the rifle down, wiping his hands on a rag. Just keeping things in order, Mr. Poirot. The master's disappearance has us all on edge. A man's got to stay busy, indeed, Poirot said, his gaze sweeping the stable. The stalls were tidy, the horses calm. But his eyes lingered on a pile of hay in the corner, slightly disturbed, as if it had been hastily rearranged. You were here last night, I presume, alone. Thomas nodded, his jaw tightening. All night, checking the horses, securing the tack. No one else about. Poirot's mustache twitched. And yet, I find footprints leading from the manor to this very spot. Curious, is it not? They end at the pond, as if their maker wished to disappear. Thomas's hand stilled, but his expression remained guarded. Plenty of folk come and go around here. Could be anyone's tracks. Perhaps, Poirot said. Stepping closer to the hay pile, he bent, his fingers brushing the straw, and uncovered a small, glinting object, a brass button, engraved with a faint crest. He held it up, catching the light. This, however, is not so common. It is from a gentleman's coat, I think. One of quality. Thomas's eyes flickered to the button, but he said nothing. His silence is telling as any confession. Poirot pocketed the button and turned toward the door. We shall speak again, Monsieur Blackwood. For now, I have other matters to attend. As he stepped back into the cold, Poirot's mind churned. The button was a clue, but its owner was unclear. It could belong to Charles, whose tailored coats bore similar crests, or perhaps to Sir Reginald himself. The pawn, however, demanded his immediate attention. He summoned Mortimer, the butler, and requested a team to drag the pond's shallow depths. The old man's face paled, but he nodded. Hurrying off to gather the necessary hands, while waiting, Poirot retraced his steps to the pond, his eyes scanning the surrounding snow. A faint trail, nearly obscured by the wind, caught his attention. A set of smaller prints, lighter, perhaps those of a woman or a youth. They led from the pond toward a cluster of bare hawthorn bushes, where they had vanished. Poirot frowned. 2 sets of tracks, 2 disappearances. The plot thickened. As the English would say, the dragging of the pond began under Poirot's watchful eye. The estate's groundsman, grim-faced and bubbled against the cold, worked with long poles, breaking through the thin ice to probe the murky depths. After an hour, one of the men called out, his pole catching on something heavy. With effort, they hauled up a leather briefcase, its surface slick with algae and ice. Poirot's heart quickened as he took the case, its weight suggesting contents of significance. He opened it carefully, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a frayed ribbon. The paper was damp but intact, and the handwriting was precise, almost clerical. Poirot scanned the first letter, his brow furrowing. It was addressed to Sir Reginald and spoke of a debt long unpaid, and a secret that would shatter the Ashby name. The tone was menacing, the intent clear. Blackmail. The signature was a single initial, V, offering no immediate clue to the sender's identity. Poirot tucked the letters into his coat, his mind racing. Blackmail was a motive as old as time, but its presence here suggested a deeper rot within the Ashby family. Sir Reginald's disappearance was no mere accident. It was a carefully orchestrated act, and the pawn was a stage for misdirection. But who was the director of this grim play? Charles, with his scratched hand and nervous demeanor. Beatrice, whose enigmatic silence hid a wealth of secrets. Or Thomas, whose solitary vigil in the stables seemed less innocent with each passing moment. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor, finding her in the drawing room, her posture rigid as she sipped tea. The fire crackled, casting shadows across her sharp features. Madam, Poirot began, these letters, found in the pond, speak of a scandal. A scandal involving your husband's brother. You will tell me what you know. Lady Eleanor's cup paused at her lips, her eyes narrowing. I know nothing of blackmail, Mr. Poirot. Reginald was a private man, but he kept his own counsel. If there were letters, they are likely forgeries, meant to tarnish his name. Poirot tilted his head, studying her, and yet the briefcase was hidden with care. Someone wished it to remain unseen. Tell me, madam, who in this house might wish to harm Sir Reginald? Her gaze hardened. My son, Charles, loved his uncle, despite their disagreements. Beatrice, she is loyal to the family, whatever her faults, and Thomas Blackwood is a servant, nothing more. You are chasing shadows, Mr. Poirot. Shadows, perhaps, Poirot said, but shadows cast by a very real hand. I shall find it, madam, of that you may be certain. He left her, his mind turning to the stable boy, a lad of perhaps 16 who had lingered at the edge of the pond during the dragging. Poirot found him in the kitchen, peeling potatoes under the watchful eye of the cook. The boy, named Jem, looked up with wide eyes as Poirot approached. Young man, Poirot said gently, you were at the stables last night. You saw something, perhaps, a figure near the pond. Jem hesitated, glancing at the cook, who gave a curt nod. Sir, I saw someone, cloak-like, moving quick by the pond. Couldn't see their face, but they were in a hurry. Thought it was odd, so late at night. And this figure, Poirot pressed, did they carry anything? A briefcase, perhaps? Jem shook his head. Couldn't say, sir, too dark. But they went toward the stables. Then I lost sight of him. Poirot thanked the boy and stepped outside, his breath visible in the cold air. The cloaked figure, the footprints, the briefcase all pointed to a carefully laid plan. But the broken ice at the pond's edge nodded him. Had something else been submerged? A body, perhaps, or another clue. The letters suggested a motive. But the method of Sir Reginald's disappearance remained elusive. He returned to the library, where the hidden passage had first caught his attention. The panel was cleverly disguised, its seams blending with the woodwork. Poirot examined it again, noting a faint smudge of dirt on the floor, as if someone had tracked it from the courtyard. The passage itself was narrow, its walls damp and cold, leading to a small door that opened into the snowy courtyard. Whoever had used it knew the manor's secrets intimately, someone who belonged here, not a stranger. As evening fell, Poirot gathered the family in the dining room, his presence commanding silence. Charles fidgeted, his scratched hand hidden. In his pocket, Beatrice sat pale and still, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Thomas stood by the door, his expression unreadable. Lady Eleanor presided over the table, her composure a mask of steel. Chapter 4. The blackmail letters library at Raven's End was a cavern of shadows, its towering oak shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes that seemed to absorb the weak daylight. Filtering through the leaded windows, Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the brooding grandeur of the manor. The blood-stained scarf, now carefully folded and placed on a side table, seemed to pulse with the weight of the mystery it represented. The letters found in the submerged briefcase, however, were the true enigma, their cryptic words hinting at a scandal that threatened to unravel the Ashby family's carefully curated legacy. Poirot adjusted his pince-nez and examined the letters. Again, their damp edges curling slightly under the warmth of the fire Mortimer had lit at his request. The butler, ever stoic, had retreated to the corridor. But Poirot sensed the man's lingering curiosity. Each letter was written in a meticulous hand, the ink sharp despite the water's attempt to blur it. The words were cold, calculated. Your secret will bury the Ashby name unless you pay. The truth of your indiscretion waits in the shadows. Deliver £10,000 to the chapel at midnight, or all will know. No signature, no overt clue to the sender's identity. But the tone suggested intimacy with the family's history, a history Sir Reginald had guarded fiercely. According to Lady Eleanor, Poirot's little gray cells hummed as he considered. The implications: blackmail was a crime of precision, requiring knowledge, access, and audacity. The letters pointed to someone close, someone who knew Sir Reginald's past well enough to exploit it. The scandalous affair mentioned was vague, but its threat was clear: ruin for the Ashby name. Porrett's gaze drifted to the fireplace, where a faint smudge of ash caught his eye. Kneeling carefully to avoid soiling his immaculate suit, he retrieved a burned fragment of paper from the grate. The fragment bore a single phrase in the same meticulous hand: "The child must never." The rest was lost to the flames, but the implication was electric: a child, a secret heir, perhaps, or a deeper betrayal. He rose, brushing his hands, and turned to the library's hidden panel, which he had discovered the previous day. The passage behind it was narrow, its stone walls damp with the chill of the Yorkshire winter. It led to the courtyard, where the footprints had begun. But Porrett now wondered if the passage served another purpose, perhaps a means to smuggle the letters or to meet the blackmailer in secret. The locked library, the blood-stained scarf, the passage, the footprints, all were threads in a tapestry of deception, and Porrett was determined to unravel it. He summoned Lady Eleanor to the library, her regal bearing undiminished despite the strain of her brother-in-law's disappearance. She entered with a rustle of silk, her sharp eyes scanning the room, as if expecting to find Sir Reginald himself lurking among the shelves. "Monsieur Porrett," she said, her voice steady but laced with impatience, "have you made progress, or are we to be kept in suspense indefinitely?" Porrett offered a small, polite smile. "Madam, the progress is made in the mind before it is seen in the world. These letters," he gestured to the table, "they speak of an affair, a scandal that Sir Reginald feared would destroy your families. Name, you knew of this affair, did you not?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, but she did not flinch. "Reginald was not a saint, Monsieur Porrett. Years ago, before my sister's death, he strayed. A fleeting indiscretion with a woman of no consequence, a governess, I believe, who left Ravensend shortly after. It was dealt with discreetly. I fail to see how it relates to his disappearance. Discreetly, perhaps," Porrett said, his tone mild but probing, "but not forgotten. The blackmailer knew of this affair and believed it potent enough to extract a considerable sum. Tell me, madam, who else in this household might have known of such a secret?" Her eyes flickered, a brief crack in her composure. "The family, perhaps. Servants talk, as they always do. But I assure you, this is an old wound, long-healed. Reginald would not have been foolish enough to let it resurface." Porrett nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet, madam, someone has reopened the wound. The letters were delivered here, to this very room, and someone attempted to burn evidence in this fireplace. A fragment remains, speaking of a child. Does this stir any recollection?" Lady Eleanor's face paled, though she quickly recovered. "A child? Nonsense. There was no child. The governess left, and that was the end of it. You are chasing shadows, Monsieur Porrett." "Perhaps," Porrett said, his voice soft but firm. "But shadows often hide the truth. I will speak with the others now. Merci, madam," as she departed. Porrett noted the slight tremble in her hand as she gripped her shawl. She was hiding something, but whether it was guilt or fear, he could not yet determine. His next interview was with Charles Ashby, whose nervous energy seemed to crackle in the air as he entered the library. The young man's tailored suit was impeccable, but the scratch on his hand, now scabbed over, drew Porrett's attention like a beacon. "Monsieur Charles," Porrett began, gesturing for him to sit, "these letters suggest a scandal that could ruin your family. Your mother insists it is an old matter, but your agitation suggests otherwise. Tell me, what do you know of your father's affair?" Charles's jaw tightened, and he crossed his arms, the scratch visible against his cuff. "It's nonsense. Those letters are forgeries, meant to stir trouble. My father was a good man, not some philanderer. Whoever wrote them is lying." Porrett tilted his head, studying the young man's flushed cheeks. Forgeries, you say, yet the handwriting is precise. The details intimate, and this fragment, he held up the burned scrap, speaks of a child. A curious detail for a forgery. None. Charles's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, his voice low. A child? That's absurd. There's no child. My father wouldn't look. I don't know who's behind this. But it's not real. Someone's trying to tear us apart. Someone within this house. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone gentle but piercing. You argued with your father the night he vanished over the estate's finances. A heated exchange, I am told. And this scratch on your hand gardening, you said. Yet the roses here are dormant in winter. Charles stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I told you. It was an accident. I don't have to sit here and be accused. Find the real culprit, Poirot, and stop wasting time on me, as Charles stormed out. Poirot's gaze lingered on the door. The young man's defensiveness was telling, but it was Beatrice Ashby who next drew his attention. She entered the library with a quiet grace, her dark eyes wary as they met Poirot's. Her presence was like a shadow, soft but inescapable, and Poirot sensed a depth of knowledge in her that she kept carefully veiled. Madame Beatrice, Poirot said, offering her a seat, you have heard of the letters, I presume. They speak of an affair, a scandal that threatened the Ashby name. You were married to Sir Reginald's son, yet you seem unsettled by this revelation. Why? Beatrice's fingers tightened around her handkerchief, but her voice was steady. I knew nothing of an affair. Monsieur Poirot, my late husband, never spoke of such things, and Reginald was always kind to me. If these letters are true, they're from someone cruel, someone who wants to hurt us. Cruel, perhaps, Poirot said, but also close. The letters were delivered to this locked room, and someone burned a fragment in this fireplace. You were here last night, were you not, in the manor? Did you hear or see anything unusual? Her eyes flickered, and she hesitated before answering. I was in my room, reading. I heard nothing, but the idea of a scandal doesn't surprise me. Families like this one always have secrets. They fester, don't they? Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Indeed, madam, and secrets often lead to betrayal. Tell me, what is your relationship with Thomas Blackwood? The estate manager seems protective of you. Beatrice's cheeks flushed, but she met his gaze. Thomas is a friend, nothing more. He's loyal to the family, to me, especially after my husband's death. If you're suggesting something improper, you're mistaken. None. Poirot said, raising a hand. I suggest nothing. I observe. And I observe that you are uneasy. Madam, perhaps you know more of these letters than you say. She stood, her movements sharp. I've told you what I know. If you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to. As she left, Poirot's eyes narrowed. Beatrice's unease was palpable, and her connection to Thomas Blackwood was a thread he could not ignore. The burned fragment, the letters, the affair, all pointed to a web of deceit that entangled the entire household. He decided to examine the fireplace again, sifting through the ashes with a small poker. There, buried beneath a layer of soot, he found another fragment, this one bearing a single word, Beatrice. The implications were staggering. Was she the subject of the scandal, or merely a pawn in the blackmailer's game? Poirot spent the next hour reconstructing the timeline of the night Sir Reginald vanished. The family had gathered for dinner, a tense affair marked by Charles's argument with his father. Lady Eleanor had retired early, claiming a headache, while Beatrice had lingered in the drawing room and Thomas had been seen near the stables. The staff confirmed that the library was locked after dinner, yet the scarf and letters suggested someone had gained access. The hidden passage was the key, but who had used it? He ventured outside, the cold biting at his face as he retraced the footprints to the stables. The snow had been disturbed, likely by the search party, Laporte's keen eyes spotted a faint indentation near the stable door, a cigarette butt, half buried in the frost. It was a brand he recognized from Charles's cigarette case, a detail the young man had not mentioned. Poirot pocketed the butt, his mind racing. Charles's presence near the stables contradicted his claim of being in his room all night. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out Mortimer, whose rigid posture belied a wealth of knowledge about the household. "Monsieur Mortimer," Poirot said, "you have served the Ashbys for many years. Tell me, what do you know of this governess, the one involved in Sir Reginald's affair?" The butler's face remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "It was before my time, sir, but I heard talk. A young woman, Sarah something or other, left suddenly about 20 years ago. There were rumors, but nothing confirmed. The family doesn't speak of it. And this Sarah," Poirot pressed, "did she have a child?" Mortimer hesitated, then shook his head. "Not that I know of, sir. But there was gossip about a letter sent to Sir Reginald years later. I never saw it, but the maids whispered about it." Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler, the governess, the affair, the child. The pieces were beginning to form a picture, but it was incomplete. He needed to speak with Thomas Blackwood again, but first, he returned to the library to examine the hidden passage more closely. The stone walls were rough, the air damp, and Poirot noticed a faint scuff mark on the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged through. A suitcase, perhaps, or a body. The thought sent a chill through him, though he dismissed it as premature. The day wore on, and Poirot's interviews with the staff yielded little new information. The maids confirmed Charles's argument with his father, and a footman mentioned seeing Beatrice near the library late at night, though she claimed to be fetching a book. Thomas Blackwood, when questioned, was evasive, insisting he had no knowledge of the letters or the affair. Yet his eyes lingered on the burned fragment when Poirot showed it to him, and his hands twitched as if suppressing a reaction. As evening fell, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook filled with observations. The letters were the key, but their true purpose remained elusive. Were they meant to extort money, or to distract from a greater crime? The burned fragment mentioning Beatrice suggested she was central to the mystery, but whether as victim or conspirator, he could not yet say. Charles's scratch, the cigarette butt, the footprints all pointed to his involvement, but Poirot sensed a deeper motive, one tied to the family's legacy. He decided to stage a small experiment, calling the family to the drawing room. He placed the letters on the table, watching their reactions. Lady Eleanor's face was a mask of disdain, Charles's a storm of anger, and Beatrice's a study in fear. Thomas, standing at the back, clenched his fists, his eyes darting to Beatrice. Poirot spoke calmly, outlining the blackmail scheme and mentioning the burned fragment about a child. The room grew tense, and Beatrice's hand trembled as she reached for her tea. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles snapped, "this is a waste of time. Those letters are lies, and you're stirring up trouble for no reason." "On the contrary," Poirot said, "they are the heart of the matter. Someone in this room knows the truth, and I will find it. The question is, who has the most to lose?" The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Poirot's eyes moved from face to face, noting every twitch, every glance. The mystery of Sir Reginald's disappearance was no longer just about a missing man. It was about a family fractured by secrets, and Poirot was determined to expose them all. The night deepened, and Poirot retired to his room, his mind alive with possibilities. The burned fragment, the letters, the passage, the footprints, they were all clues, but they pointed in different directions. He needed one final piece to tie them together, and he suspected it lay with Beatrice, her fear, her connection to Thomas, her presence near the library. They all suggested she held the key to the blackmailer's identity. As he prepared for bed, a faint noise outside his window caught his attention. Peering out, he saw a shadow moving toward the chapel, a cloaked figure in the moonlight. His heart quickened. The blackmailer, perhaps, or another player in this deadly game. Poirot slipped on his coat and followed, his steps silent in the snow. The mystery of Raven's End was far from solved, and the night promised new revelations. Chapter 5. The family's secret mourning mist clung to the Yorkshire moors like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the ancient stone walls of Raven's End. Hercule Poirot stood at the tall, arched window of the drawing room, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp eyes scanning the desolate landscape. The events of the previous night, the discovery of the vial of poison, and Sir Reginald Ashby's guest room had set his little gray cells ablaze with possibilities. The vial, small and unassuming, its contents a deadly promise, suggested that Sir Reginald's disappearance was no mere accident, but a calculated act. The question was, who among the inhabitants of this gloomy manor had the motive, the opportunity, and the audacity to wield such a weapon? Poirot turned from the window, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor as he surveyed the room. The drawing room was a study in faded grandeur, heavy velvet drapes, a chandelier dripping with crystal, and portraits of stern-faced Ashbys glaring down from the walls. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, but beneath it lingered something less tangible, a tension that seemed to seep from the very stones of the manor. The family, Poirot knew, was hiding something, a secret, perhaps, that bound them together as tightly as it threatened to tear them apart. Lady Eleanor Ashby sat in a high-backed chair near the fireplace, her posture rigid, her hands folded primly in her lap. Her silver hair was impeccably arranged, and her emerald eyes, though sharp, betrayed a flicker of unease. Across from her, Charles Ashby lounged with forced nonchalance, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of brandy dangling from his fingers. Despite the early hour, his tailored suit was immaculate, but the faint scratch on his hand, now partially healed, drew Poirot's attention like a beacon. Beatrice, Sir Reginald's daughter-in-law, sat apart, her delicate frame wrapped in a dark shawl, her gaze fixed on the floor as if it held the answers to her private torments. Thomas Blackwood, the estate manager, stood near the door, his broad shoulders tense, his weathered face unreadable. The room was a tableau of suspicion, each figure a piece in the puzzle Poirot was determined to solve. Amos, Poirot began, his voice smooth and precise, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The matter of Sir Reginald's disappearance grows more grave. The vial of poison discovered in his room suggests an intent most sinister. I must ask you all to be candid. What do you know of this poison? And what secrets does this family guard that might drive one to such an extreme? Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, but she spoke with measured calm. Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, this family has no secrets worth killing for. The vial must be a misunderstanding, perhaps, a medical remedy mislabeled. Sir Reginald was not a man to inspire murder. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a sign of his skepticism. And yet, Lady Eleanor, a man does not vanish into the night, leaving behind a blood-stained scarf and a vial of poison, without inspiring something. I am interested in the history of the Ashby family. There is, perhaps, a matter of inheritance, a will, a dispute that might shed light on this affair. Charles shifted in his seat, his brandy glass clinking against the armrest. There's no dispute, Poirot. My father's affairs were in order. The estate is mine by right, and theirs. No question about it. His tone was defiant, but his eyes darted toward his mother, seeking confirmation. Beatrice raised her head, her voice soft but edged with steel. Charles, you know that's not entirely true. There was talk of a new will, wasn't there, sir? Reginald mentioned it before he disappeared. The room stilled. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened around the arms of her chair, and Thomas's gaze flickered to Beatrice, a silent warning in his eyes. Poirot, ever observant, noted the sudden shift in the room's dynamics. A new will, Madame Beatrice. This is most intriguing. Pray, Tell me more. Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting the fringe of her shawl. It was just a rumor. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Reginald was secretive. He hinted at changes to his will. Something about providing for someone else. But he never shared details. I thought it was just talk to keep Charles in line. Charles slammed his glass onto the table, the amber liquid sloshing over the rim. That's nonsense, Beatrice. Father would never cut me out. You're stirring trouble, as always. His face flushed, the scratch on his hand standing out starkly against his reddened skin. Enough. Charles, Lady Eleanor said sharply, her voice cutting through her son's outburst. Monsieur Poirot, there is no new will. My husband's estate was settled years ago. Beatrice is mistaken? Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. Mistaken? Perhaps. But the mention of a will is not without significance. I shall investigate this matter further. For now, I wish to examine the guest room where the vial was found. Monsieur Blackwood, you will accompany me. Thomas nodded curtly, his expression guarded. As Poirot and Thomas left the drawing room, the detective sensed the weight of unspoken truths trailing behind them. The Ashby family was a tapestry of secrets, and he intended to unravel every thread. The guest room where Sir Reginald had stayed was a spacious chamber on the second floor, its heavy oak furniture and faded tapestries exuding an air of neglect. The bed was neatly made, the pillows undisturbed, but the vial of poison, now safely in Poirot's possession, had been found on the nightstand, half hidden beneath a book of poetry. Poirot examined the room methodically, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of the furniture, his eyes scanning for anomalies. Tell me, Monsieur Blackwood, Poirot said as he lifted the corner of a rug, revealing nothing but dust. What is your role in this household? You are the estate manager. But I sense there is more to your connection with the Ashbys. Thomas leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. I manage the land, the tenants, the accounts. Been doing it for 10 years. The Ashbys trust me. That's all there is to it. Poirot straightened, fixing Thomas with a piercing gaze. Trust, you say. And yet, I detect a certain loyalty, perhaps, to Madame Beatrice. You defended her in the drawing room. Why, Thomas's jaw tightened, but he met Poirot's gaze without flinching. Beatrice is a good woman. She's had a hard time here. Married to Sir Reginald's son before he died. Charles treats her like an outsider. And Lady Eleanor, well, she's not one for warmth. I look out for her. That's all. Looking out, Monsieur Blackwood, can take many forms. Poirot said, his tone light but probing. Perhaps you know something of this new will Beatrice mentioned. Thomas shook his head. I don't meddle in family business. Sir Reginald never spoke of a will to me. Poirot nodded, though he filed Thomas's denial away for later scrutiny. He moved to the nightstand, where the book of poetry still lay. It was a worn volume of Keats, its pages yellowed with age opening it. Poirot found a faint pencil mark circling a line. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. Beneath the line, in the same pencil, was a single word, legacy. Curious, Poirot murmured, a clue, perhaps, or a message. Monsieur Blackwood, do you know if Sir Reginald was fond of poetry? Thomas shrugged. Never saw him read anything but ledgers. That book's probably been there for years. Poirot slipped the book into his pocket, his mind already turning over the implications. The word legacy resonated with Beatrice's mention of a new will. He needed to find the family solicitor. But first, he would explore the manor's archives, where the Ashby family's history might yield answers. The archives were housed in a cramped room in the manor's east wing, its shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound ledgers and dusty files. The air was musty, and the single window offered little light, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot, armed with a lantern, began sifting through the records, his fingers deftly flipping through decades of Ashby history. Thomas had been dismissed to attend to his duties, leaving Poirot alone with the ghost of Raven's End. The records were meticulous, detailing land purchases, tenant agreements, and family milestones. Poirot's interest peaked when he found a folder labeled Wills and Testaments. Inside, he discovered Sir Reginald's original will, dated 10 years prior, naming Charles as the primary heir to the estate. There was no mention of Beatrice or any unborn child, which made her earlier comment all the more intriguing. As he dug deeper, Poirot uncovered a sealed envelope marked confidential. Breaking the wax seal, he found a draft of a new will, dated only a month before Sir Reginald's disappearance. The document was unfinished, but its contents were explosive. Sir Reginald intended to revise his will, leaving a significant portion of the estate to Beatrice's unborn child, provided the child was born within a year of his death. Charles's inheritance was reduced to a modest stipend, a decision that would have enraged him. Poirot's heart quickened. This was the motive. He had been seeking a reason for someone to ensure Sir Reginald never finalized the document. But who else knew of this will? Beatrice had hinted at it, but her knowledge seemed vague. Lady Eleanor had denied its existence, and Charles had reacted with fury at the mere suggestion. Thomas, too, might have known, given his closeness to Beatrice. Closing the envelope, Poirot tucked it into his coat. He needed to verify its authenticity with the family solicitor. But first, he would confront the family with this new evidence. The truth, he sensed, was close, but it was tangled in a web of loyalty and betrayal. The dining room was a cavernous space, its long oak table set for a tense luncheon. The family gathered reluctantly, their faces etched with suspicion and fatigue. Poirot stood at the head of the table, the envelope in his hand. His presence, commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady. "I have uncovered a document that casts new light on Sir Reginald's disappearance. A draft of a new will, one that alters the inheritance of this estate. Madame Beatrice, you spoke of rumors. Were you aware of this document?" Beatrice's eyes widened, her hands clutching her shawl. I only heard whispers. Sir Reginald mentioned providing for my child, but I thought it was a jest. He was always so secretive." Charles's face darkened. "This is absurd. My father would never betray me like that. That document is a fake, Poirot. Someone planted it to frame me." Lady Eleanor's voice was icy. "Charles, control yourself, Monsieur Poirot. Where did you find the so-called will?" "In the archives, Lady Eleanor," Poirot replied, watching her closely. "Sealed and hidden, as if someone wished it to remain undiscovered. Yet someone knew of its existence, for it speaks to a motive most compelling, a motive for murder." Thomas, standing near the door, shifted uncomfortably. "You're saying someone killed Sir Reginald over this will? That's a leap, Poirot." "Not a leap, Monsieur Blackwood, but a step," Poirot said. "The vial of poison, the blood-stained scarf, the hidden passage all point to a plan, and this will suggest a reason. Who among you would lose the most if Sir Reginald's wishes were fulfilled?" The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words pressing down on them. Charles's hands clenched into fists, Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, and Lady Eleanor's face was a mask of composure, though her knuckles were white. Thomas's gaze darted to Beatrice, a flicker of protectiveness in his eyes. Before anyone could respond, a maid entered, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, there's something you should see. In the garden. It's a glove, sir, covered in blood." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Lead the way, mademoiselle." The garden was a frozen wasteland, its rose bushes skeletal under a layer of frost. The maid led Poirot to a corner near the greenhouse, where a single leather glove lay half buried in the snow. Its dark brown surface was stained with dried blood, and a monogram R.A. was embroidered on the cuff. "Sir Reginald Ashby." Poirot knelt, examining the glove without touching it. "This is most significant," he murmured. "The blood is old, but the glove is not weathered. It was placed here recently, perhaps to be found." Charles, who had followed with the others, scoffed. "Another plant, Poirot. Someone's trying to pin this on me, or to distract us, Poirot said. Rising, the glove is a clue, but not the answer. We must return to the will, to the poison, to the secrets you all guard so closely. Beatrice's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, I swear I knew nothing of this glove. But I must tell you something. Sir Reginald spoke to me the night he vanished. He said he was afraid of someone in this house. He wouldn't say who. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Afraid, you say? This is most important, madam. Did he give any hint, any detail? Beatrice shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, only that he felt betrayed. He said the legacy was a curse. The word legacy echoed in Poirot's mind, linking back to the penciled note in the poetry book. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. He turned to the family, his voice firm. This evening, we shall dine together, and I shall ask more questions. No one is to leave this manor until I have uncovered the truth. As the family dispersed, Poirot lingered in the garden, his eyes scanning the snow for further clues. The glove, the will, the poison all pointed to a deliberate act, but the motive remained elusive. Was it Charles, furious at being disinherited? Beatrice, protecting her unborn child? Lady Eleanor, guarding the family's honor? Or Thomas, whose loyalty to Beatrice might hide a darker purpose? The afternoon was spent in quiet investigation. Poirot visited the village to speak with the family solicitor, Mr. Harold Grayson. A weary man with a nervous tic, Grayson confirmed the existence of the draft will, though he claimed it was never finalized. Sir Reginald was cautious, Grayson said, adjusting his spectacles. He wanted to ensure Beatrice's child was provided for, but he feared Charles's reaction. He asked me to keep it confidential until he made a final decision. Did anyone else know of this will? Poirot asked. Grayson hesitated. Lady Eleanor was present when we discussed it. She was displeased, said it would tear the family apart. Poirot nodded, his suspicions deepening. Lady Eleanor's denial in the drawing room had been too swift, too certain. She was hiding something, and he would find out what, returning to the manor. Poirot spent the remaining hours before dinner examining the secret passage he had discovered in the library. It wound through the manor's walls, connecting the library to the courtyard and, he discovered, to a hidden staircase leading to the guest wing. The passage was narrow, its walls damp with age, but it was clear it had been used recently. Faint scuff marks marred the stone floor. As he emerged from the passage, Poirot's mind raced. The passage offered a way to move unseen, to plant evidence, to strike without detection. The poison, the scarf, the glove, all could have been placed by someone familiar with the manor's secrets. And who knew those secrets better than Lady Eleanor, who had lived at Ravensend her entire life? Dinner was a strained affair. The clink of silverware against porcelain, the only sound breaking the silence. The family sat around the table, their faces drawn, each avoiding the other's eyes. Poirot, seated at the head, observed them with the intensity of a hawk. The maid's discovery of the glove had rattled them, and he intended to use that to his advantage. Mzamis, he said, setting down his fork, let us speak of betrayal. Sir Reginald feared it. Madame Beatrice tells me. He spoke of the legacy as a curse. I believe this legacy, this will, this estate is at the heart of his disappearance. Lady Eleanor, you denied knowledge of the new will, yet the solicitor confirms you were aware of it. Why did you lie? Lady Eleanor's fork froze midway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly, her eyes narrowing. I did not lie, Monsieur Poirot. I said there was no new will because it was never finalized. It was a draft, nothing more. I saw no need to mention it, and yet it was significant enough to hide. Poirot said, significant enough to cause fear, anger, perhaps even murder. Charles, you were to lose your inheritance. Did you know? Charles's face reddened. I told you. It's a fake. I didn't know about any will, and I didn't touch my father. Beatrice's voice was barely a whisper. "Charles, stop. You argued with him that night. I heard you. You were shouting about money, about the estate." Charles rounded on her, his chair scraping back. "You'd love to see me hang, wouldn't you? You and your precious child, stealing what's mine." "Enough." Lady Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. "This family will not descend into chaos. Monsieur Poirot, you are stirring up trouble where there is none. My husband is missing, not dead. You have no proof of murder." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Proof, Lady Eleanor, is what I seek, and I shall find it. The glove, the poison, the will, these are threads in a tapestry of deceit. Someone in this room knows more than they admit." Thomas, who had been silent, spoke up. "You're looking in the wrong place. Poirot, the staff talk. There's been strangers on the estate, poachers, maybe, or someone with a grudge. Why focus on us?" Poirot tilted his head. "A fair point, Monsieur Blackwood. But strangers do not know the secret passages of this manor, nor do they have access to Sir Reginald's scarf, his glove, his room. No, the answer lies within these walls." The dinner ended in uneasy silence, the family dispersing to their rooms. Poirot remained at the table, his mind turning over the clues. The will was the key, but it was not the only piece of the puzzle. The poison suggested premeditation, the glove a clumsy attempt at misdirection, and then there was the matter of the secret passage, known only to those closest to the family. As night fell, Poirot returned to the guest room, determined to find more evidence. The room was as he had left it, but something felt different. A faint scent, perhaps, or a shift in the air. He moved to the wardrobe, its heavy doors creaking as he opened them. Inside, tucked behind a pile of linens, was a small leather journal, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's meticulous handwriting. Poirot sat on the bed, the lantern casting shadows as he read. The journal detailed Sir Reginald's growing unease about his family. "Charles is reckless, spending beyond our means," he wrote. "Eleanor is consumed by pride, unwilling to see the estate falter. Beatrice carries a burden I cannot name, and Thomas, I suspect his loyalty lies elsewhere." The final entry, dated the night of his disappearance, was chilling. "I fear I have trusted the wrong person. The legacy must be protected. But at what cost?" Poirot closed the journal, his heart heavy. Sir Reginald had sensed his own doom, yet he had not fled. Why? The answer, Poirot knew, lay in the family's secrets he was determined to uncover. As he left the room, a floorboard creaked. In the hall, Poirot froze, his hand on his cane, ready to defend himself. The sound came again, closer now, and then a shadow passed under the door. Someone was watching. "Monsieur, madam?" Poirot called softly. "Show yourself." Chapter 6. The midnight intraderth wind howled outside Raven's End, rattling the ancient windows of the manor as Hercule Poirot sat in his guest room. The dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the oak-paneled walls. The events of the day, the blood-stained scarf, the secret passage, the cryptic letters, and the vial of poison swirled in his mind, each fragment a piece of a puzzle that refused to coalesce. His little gray cells, as he so often called them, were hard at work, sifting through the contradictions and half-truths that clung to the Ashby family like cobwebs. The hour was late, approaching midnight, and the manor had fallen into an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling under the weight of its secrets. Poirot adjusted his pince-nez and turned a page in the small notebook where he had meticulously recorded his observations. The scratch on Charles's hand, Beatrice's unease at the mention of the affair, Thomas Blackwood's evasive answers about his whereabouts, and Lady Eleanor's steely composure all pointed to a web of motives tangled in deceit. The vial of poison, found tucked behind a loose panel in Sir Reginald's guest room, was particularly troubling. It was a small, unassuming glass bottle, stoppered with a cork and filled with a colorless liquid that Poirot suspected was arsenic. Its presence suggested premeditation, a cold intent to harm. Yet it had not been used, or so it seemed, given the absence of a body. The blood-stained scarf and the broken ice at the pond hinted at violence, but the locked library and the secret passage suggested a more calculated act. Poirot's instincts told him the truth lay in the intersections of these clues, in the silent spaces where the family's loyalties and betrayals collided. A faint noise, like the scuff of a shoe on wood, interrupted his thoughts. Poirot froze, his ears straining to catch the sound again. The manor was supposed to be asleep, its inhabitants tucked away in their rooms. Yet the noise came from the corridor beyond his door, a soft, deliberate tread, as if someone were taking care not to be heard. He rose silently, his movements precise despite the late hour, and slipped on his dressing gown, a rich burgundy silk that contrasted sharply with the stark simplicity of the room. His hand closed around the small silver letter opener on the desk, a precaution rather than a weapon, and he moved toward the door. The corridor was dark. The gas lamps turned low, casting pools of shadow that seemed to shift with the flickering light. Poirot stepped out, his eyes adjusting to the gloom, and caught a glimpse of a figure moving at the far end of the hall. It was too dark to discern features, but the figure's silhouette suggested a woman, slender, with a long skirt that brushed the floor. The figure paused at the corner, then disappeared around it, heading toward the east wing, where Sir Reginald's room was located. Poirot's curiosity surged. Who would be prowling the manor at this hour, and why? He followed, his patent leather shoes silent on the thick carpet, his senses alert to every sound. The east wing was colder, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish. As he rounded the corner, he saw the door to Sir Reginald's room ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the corridor. He approached cautiously, peering through the gap. Inside, Beatrice Ashby stood by the writing desk, her hands trembling as she rifled through a drawer. Her auburn hair, usually pinned neatly, hung loose, and her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously as if she expected to be caught at any moment. "Madam Ashby," Poirot said softly, stepping into the room. Beatrice gasped, dropping a small velvet pouch onto the desk. It landed with a soft thud, and something inside glinted in the lamplight, a metallic sheen that caught Poirot's eye. "It is rather late for a search, non? Perhaps you would care to explain what brings you to Sir Reginald's room at this hour." Beatrice's hands flew to her chest, and for a moment, Poirot thought she might faint, but she steadied herself, her expression shifting from fear to defiance. "Monsieur Poirot, you startled me," she said, her voice low but firm. I was looking for a keepsake, a locket that belonged to my late husband, Sir Reginald's son. It was dear to me, and I thought it might be here." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly as he studied her. The explanation was plausible, but her trembling hands and the haste of her search suggested otherwise. He stepped closer to the desk, his eyes fixed on the velvet pouch. "A locket, you say, and this?" He gestured to the pouch, which Beatrice quickly snatched up, clutching it to her chest. "It's nothing," she said, too quickly. "Just personal items. I didn't mean to disturb anything." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. "Madam, the hour is late, and the circumstances are most unusual. A man is missing. A scarf stained with blood has been found, and now you are searching his room in secret. You will forgive Poirot if he finds your explanation incomplete." Beatrice's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted to the door, as if weighing the possibility of flight, but Poirot's calm, unwavering presence seemed to anchor her in place. He stepped past her to the desk, his fingers brushing the surface where she had been searching. The drawer was half open, revealing a jumble of papers, letters, receipts, and a small notebook with Sir Reginald's initials embossed on the cover. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he noticed a faint scratch on the desk's edge, fresh enough to suggest recent tampering. "Perhaps, madam, you will permit Poirot to assist you in your search," he said, his tone polite but edged with steel. "After all, 2 pairs of eyes are better than one, non. Beatrice hesitated, then nodded, stepping back as Poirot opened the drawer fully. Among the papers, he found a hidden compartment, cleverly disguised as part of the drawer's base. With a gentle press, it sprang open, revealing a small safe, its lock gleaming in the lamplight. Inside was a diamond necklace, its stones sparkling with a cold, almost malevolent beauty. The setting was ornate, unmistakably antique, and Poirot recognized it at once as a piece of significant value. Mon Dieu, he murmured, lifting the necklace carefully. This is no mere keepsake, Madame Ashby. This is a family heirloom, is it not? Beatrice's face drained of color. It was stolen years ago, she whispered. It belonged to Lady Eleanor's mother, passed down through the Ashby line. It disappeared after a ball, and everyone thought it was lost forever. How did it end up here? Poirot's mind raced. The necklace, the blackmail letters, the blood-stained scarf all were threads in the same tapestry, woven together by a motive he had yet to fully unravel. He turned to Beatrice, his voice gentle but probing. Madam, you knew this necklace was here, did you not? And perhaps you know who took it all those years ago. Beatrice shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. I swear, I didn't know it was here until tonight. I heard a noise earlier, like someone moving in this room, and I came to check. I thought it might be connected to Sir Reginald's disappearance. Poirot studied her closely. Her distress seemed genuine, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, fear, perhaps, or guilt. He placed the necklace back in the safe, closing it with a soft click. Very well, madam, but you must understand. Poirot does not believe in coincidences. The necklace, the letters, the poison all point to a deeper truth. If you know more than you say, it would be wise to speak now. Beatrice's hands twisted together, the velvet pouch still clutched tightly. I can't, she whispered. Not yet, please, Monsieur Poirot. You must believe me. I'm not the one you're looking for. Poirot nodded, though his eyes remained sharp. For now, madam, I will take you at your word, but I advise you to return to your room. The night is full of shadows, and not all of them are as harmless as they seem. Beatrice hesitated, then fled the room, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Poirot waited until the sound faded, then turned his attention to the safe. The necklace was a clue of immense importance, not only for its value, but for what it represented: a theft that had humiliated the Ashby family, a scandal buried but never forgotten. He suspected the thief was someone close to the family, someone who had access to the manor and its secrets. And if the necklace was linked to the blackmail letters, as he now believed, then the thief might also be involved in Sir Reginald's disappearance. He left the room, locking the door behind him, and made his way to the library, where the blood-stained scarf had been found. The secret passage he had discovered earlier nodded his thoughts. It was a clever construction, hidden behind a panel in the library wall, leading to the courtyard and, potentially, to the stables where the footprints had been found. The passage suggested an inside job, someone familiar with the manor's hidden corners. But who? Charles, with his scratched hand and nervous demeanor? Beatrice, with her midnight search and evasive answers? Or Thomas Blackwood, whose brooding presence and vague alibis hinted at secrets of his own? In the library, Poirot examined the secret panel again, running his fingers along its edges. The mechanism was well-oiled, suggesting recent use, and he found a faint smudge of dirt on the floor, likely from the courtyard beyond. He stepped into the passage, the air growing colder as he descended a narrow stone staircase. The passage was damp, the walls slick with moisture, and it ended at a heavy wooden door that opened into the snowy courtyard. Poirot pushed it open, the cold biting at his face, and scanned the ground. The footprints he had seen earlier were gone, covered by fresh snow. But he noticed something new: a faint glint in the snow near the passage's entrance. Kneeling, He brushed away the snow and found a small silver cufflink engraved with the initials T.B. Thomas Blackwood. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The estate manager had claimed to be alone in the stables all night, yet here was evidence placing him near the secret passage. It was not proof of guilt, but it was a thread to pull, a clue to follow. He pocketed the cufflink and returned to the manor, his mind turning to the blackmail letters. The cryptic notes found in the submerged briefcase had pointed to Sir Reginald's affair, a scandal that threatened the Ashby legacy. But the burned fragment in the fireplace suggested someone was trying to destroy evidence, to cover their tracks. Was it Eleanor, protecting her family's name? Charles, desperate to secure his inheritance? Or Beatrice, whose reaction to the necklace suggested she knew more than she admitted? Poirot returned to his room, the silver cufflink heavy in his pocket. He sat at the desk, his notebook open, and began to sketch a timeline of the previous night's events. Cross-referencing the family's alibis with the physical evidence, the blood-stained scarf, found in the locked library, suggested a struggle. Yet the absence of a body complicated the picture. The secret passage and the footprints indicated an escape. But the broken ice at the pond hinted at something more sinister, a body disposed of, perhaps, or a deliberate misdirection. The poison vial pointed to intent, but its unused state raised questions. And now the diamond necklace, a stolen heirloom reappearing after years, tied the past to the present in a way Poirot could not yet fully grasp. As he wrote, another noise caught his attention, a faint creak from the floor above, where the family's private quarters were located. He glanced at the clock. 1:30. The manor should be asleep, yet someone was still moving. Poirot rose again, his curiosity undimmed, and made his way to the staircase, the letter opener still in his hand. The upper floor was darker, the air thicker with the weight of secrets. He followed the sound to Lady Eleanor's room, where a thin line of light glowed beneath the door. He knocked softly, and the door opened almost immediately. Lady Eleanor stood before him, her silver hair neatly braided, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. She was fully dressed, as if she had not yet retired, and her expression was one of guarded surprise. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "what brings you to my door at such an hour?" Poirot inclined his head, his manner impeccable. "Madam, forgive the intrusion, but Poirot is troubled by certain inconsistencies. I heard a noise and thought it prudent to investigate. May I ask what keeps you awake?" Eleanor's lips tightened, but she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Her room was elegant, filled with antique furniture and family portraits, but Poirot noticed a small writing desk in the corner, its surface cluttered with papers. Among them was a letter, half-written, its ink still wet. He could not read the words from where he stood, but the sight of it piqued his interest. "I could not sleep," Eleanor said, following his gaze. "The events of the past day weigh heavily on me. I was writing to my solicitor, arranging matters in case Reginald does not return." Poirot nodded, though his eyes remained on the desk. "A prudent measure, madam. But tell me, do you know of a diamond necklace, an Ashby heirloom, stolen years ago?" Eleanor's face remained impassive, but her hands clenched briefly at her sides. "The necklace," she said softly. "Yes, I remember it. A shameful incident. It was my mother's, a gift from her father. Its loss was a blow to the family's pride." "Why do you ask?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "It has been found, madam, in a safe in Sir Reginald's room. Most curious, that an item stolen so long ago should reappear now, at the very moment of his disappearance." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her silence more telling than words. Poirot pressed on. "And the blackmail letters, madam. You knew of Sir Reginald's affair, yet you did not speak of it." Wide her composure faltered, just for a moment. "It was a private matter," she said. "Reginald's indiscretions were his own to bear. I saw no need to air them publicly." even when they may be linked to his disappearance. Poirot's voice was gentle, but his eyes were unrelenting. Madam, Poirot believes that the truth, however painful, is the only path to justice. If you know more, you must speak. Eleanor turned away, her gaze fixed on a portrait of a stern-looking man, her late husband, perhaps, or another Ashby ancestor. I have told you all I know, she said. Now, if you will excuse me, I must rest. Poirot bowed, sensing he would get no more from her tonight. But as he left the room, he glanced back at the writing desk, memorizing the shape of the letter's opening lines. It was addressed to someone named C, and the words "forgive me" stood out starkly against the page. Charles, perhaps, or someone else entirely. Back in his room, Poirot sat once more, his notebook filling with new questions. The necklace tied the blackmail to the theft to the family, and the family to the disappearance. Thomas Blackwood's cufflink placed him at the scene of the escape, but Beatrice's midnight search suggested she, too, was searching for answers or hiding them, and Eleanor, with her half-written letter and guarded answers, was a puzzle in herself. Was she protecting her son, her family's name, or something deeper? The night stretched on, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the chapel, where Thomas Blackwood had been seen by the stable boy. The chapel was old, its stones weathered by centuries of Yorkshire winters, and it stood apart from the manor, a place of solitude and secrets. If the blackmailer had used it as a meeting point, as the coded note suggested, then it might hold more clues. Poirot resolved to visit it at dawn, to search for signs of the mysterious figure who had escaped his ambush. As he prepared to retire, he opened his window, letting the cold air clear his mind. The snow had stopped, and the moors stretched out before him, vast and desolate under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Sir Reginald's fate lay hidden, and Poirot knew that the truth was closer than anyone in the manor dared to admit. He closed the window, his resolve hardened, and lay down, his little gray cells working tirelessly into the night. The dawn came slowly, the sky a pale gray as Poirot made his way to the chapel, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the chill. The building was small, its stone walls covered in ivy, its stained glass windows dark and unlit. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior with rows of wooden pews and a small altar. The air was heavy with the scent of old wax and damp stone, and Poirot's eyes scanned the space for anything out of place. Near the altar, he found a torn piece of fabric caught on a splinter pew of dark blue wool, finer than the stable boy's cloak but similar to the cloaks worn by the manor staff. He tucked it into his pocket, alongside the cufflink, and continued his search in the corner. Behind a cracked statue of an angel, he found a small trapdoor, barely visible beneath the dust. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted, and, with a gentle nudge from his letter opener, it gave way. The trapdoor led to a narrow staircase. Descending into darkness, Poirot lit a match, its flickering light revealing a cramped cellar filled with old crates and cobwebs. At the far end, he found a wooden box, its lid ajar. Inside was a single photograph, creased and faded, showing a young Beatrice and Thomas Blackwood standing together, their arms around each other, smiling in a way that spoke of intimacy. The photograph was torn, as if someone had tried to destroy it, but the faces were unmistakable. Poirot's heart quickened. The photograph confirmed what he had begun to suspect. Beatrice and Thomas were connected, perhaps romantically, and their relationship was a secret the family had buried. Was this the motive behind the blackmail? Had Sir Reginald discovered their affair and threatened to expose it, or was the necklace the key? A stolen treasure that tied them all to a crime long past. He climbed back to the chapel, the photograph in his hand, and stood by the altar, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. The blackmailer, the thief, the murderer, if indeed there was a murder, were all linked. But the final revelation eluded him. He needed more evidence, more time to unravel the threads. As he left the chapel, he saw Thomas Blackwood approaching, his face pale and his eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice rough, "what are you doing here?" Poirot held up the photograph, watching Thomas's reaction. The man's face hardened, but he said nothing, his silence a confession in itself. "Monsieur Blackwood," Poirot said softly, "it is time for the truth, the necklace, the letters. The Blood Poirot will find the answers, with or without your help. But it would be better for you to speak now." Chapter 7. The stables at dawn. First light of dawn crept over the Yorkshire moors, casting a pale, silvery glow across the frost-covered grounds of Raven's Inn. The air was sharp, biting at Hercule Poirot's face as he pulled his coat tighter and made his way toward the stables, his polished shoes crunching against the frozen grass. The events of the previous night, the shadowy figure, Beatrice's trembling hands, and the discovery of the diamond necklace had set his little gray cells into overdrive. The stables, where the mysterious footprints had led him before, beckoned. As the next piece of the puzzle and Sir Reginald Ashby's disappearance, Poirot's breath formed small clouds in the chilly air as he approached the low, stone-walled structure. The stables were old, their wooden beams weathered by time and the harsh moorland winds. The faint scent of hay and leather lingered, mixed with the damp earthiness of the morning. The stable doors creaked as he pushed them open, revealing a dimly lit interior where the soft nickering of horses greeted him. His eyes scanned the stalls, the hay-strewn floor, and the tools hanging neatly on the walls. Something about this place felt pivotal, a nexus of secrets waiting to be uncovered. He moved methodically, his gloved hands brushing lightly against the wooden stalls as he examined the surroundings. The footprints he had followed the previous day had ended abruptly near the frozen pond, but his instincts told him the stables held answers. The stable boy, a weary lad named Jem, had mentioned seeing a cloaked figure near the pond, and Thomas Blackwood's presence here yesterday, polishing a rifle with an air of unease, had not escaped Poirot's notice. There was a thread connecting these elements, and he intended to unravel it. As he stepped deeper into the stables, his eyes caught a glint of something metallic half buried in a pile of hay. Near the back wall, kneeling carefully, Poirot brushed the straw aside, revealing a small, bloodied knife. Its blade was no longer than his hand, but its edge was sharp, and the dark stains crusting the metal were unmistakable. He held it up to the faint light filtering through a cracked window, his mind racing. This was no ordinary tool. It was part of a set, likely from the manor's kitchen, and its presence here suggested a deliberate act of concealment. Poirot wrapped the knife carefully in his handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket. The blood could be animal, perhaps from a hunt, as Thomas had claimed about his rifle. But Poirot's instincts leaned toward a darker truth. He needed to test the blood and confirm its origin. But first, he wanted to confront Thomas Blackwood. The estate manager's brooding demeanor and vague answers had already marked him as a figure of interest, and this knife could be the key to cracking his facade. As Poirot straightened, he heard the soft creak of the stable door behind him. Turning swiftly, he saw Thomas Blackwood himself standing in the doorway, his broad frame silhouetted against the dawn light. Thomas's dark eyes narrowed, and his hands, callous from years of labor, hung tensely at his sides. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and guarded, "you're up early, as are you, Monsieur Blackwood." Poirot replied, his tone polite but laced with steel. "It seems the stables are a place of great interest this morning. Perhaps you can explain why I have found this." He held up the wrapped knife, watching Thomas's reaction closely. Thomas's face tightened, his jaw clenching almost imperceptibly. "That's a hunting knife," he said quickly, "used for skinning game. I cleaned it yesterday after a hunt. Must have dropped it in the hay." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "A hunting knife, you say, yet it is curiously similar to the kitchen set in the manor, and the blood fresh. None? I wonder if it is the blood of a deer or something else." Thomas shifted his weight, his eyes darting to the side before returning to Poirot. I don't know what you're implying, but I've got nothing to hide. I was here last night, cleaning tools. Like I said, alone, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but probing. And yet, the stable boy, Jum, mentioned seeing a cloaked figure near the pond, not far from here. A curious coincidence, none. Perhaps you saw this figure as well. Thomas's expression darkened, and he took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. Jem's a boy with an overactive imagination. I didn't see anyone. You're barking up the wrong tree. Poirot raised a hand, his calm demeanor unshaken. We shall see. Monsieur Blackwood, the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, no matter how deeply it is buried. He gestured toward the manor. Come, let us return to the house. I have questions for the others, and this knife will require further examination. As they walked back through the frosty grounds, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The knife was a significant find, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. The blood-stained scarf in the library, the secret passage, the footprints, the submerged briefcase, the blackmail letters. And now this knife all pointed to a web of deceit spun by someone within Raven's End. Thomas's defensive posture suggested he knew more than he was admitting, but Poirot needed evidence, not merely suspicion. Back at the manor, Poirot sought out the housekeeper, Mrs. Grimsby, a stout woman with a no-nonsense demeanor who oversaw the kitchen staff. He presented the knife, still wrapped in his handkerchief, and asked if it belonged to the manor's collection. Mrs. Grimsby's eyes widened as she examined it. That's one of ours, sir, she confirmed, her voice tinged with unease. From the kitchen set, but it's been missing for a day or two. I thought one of the maids misplaced it. And who has access to the kitchen? Madam, Poirot asked, his gaze steady. Everyone, really. Mrs. Grimsby replied. The family, the staff. Even Mr. Blackwood comes through now and then for a cup of tea or to fetch something for the stables. It's a busy place. Poirot nodded, filing away this information. The knife's accessibility meant anyone in the manor could have taken it, but its presence in the stables pointed to someone familiar with that area, someone like Thomas. Yet Poirot's instincts told him not to focus solely on the estate manager. The family dynamics were fraught, and Charles Ashby's behavior warranted closer scrutiny. He sought out Charles next, finding him in the morning room, nursing a cup of coffee and staring moodily out the window. The young man's face was pale, his eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. The scratch on his hand, which he had claimed was from gardening, was still visible, though it had begun to heal. Poirot sat opposite him, his posture impeccable, and began with his usual disarming politeness. Monsieur Charles, a word, if you please. The knife I have found in the stables, it is from the manor's kitchen. A curious place for such a tool to end up. Perhaps you can enlighten me about your movements the night your father disappeared. Charles's hand tightened around his cup, and he met Poirot's gaze with a flicker of defiance. I told you, I was in my room after dinner. I didn't go to the stables, and I certainly didn't take any knife. That scratch was from pruning roses in the garden. You're wasting your time with me, Poirot. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. And yet, monsieur, the maid, Clara, informs me that you were not in your room at the time you claim. She passed by your door shortly after midnight and found it open, with no sign of you. Where were you, if not in your room? Charles's face flushed, and he set his cup down with a clatter. Clara's mistaken. I might have stepped out for a moment to the library. Perhaps. I don't recall. It was a chaotic night. With father disappearing, everyone was on edge. The library, Poirot mused, leaning back in his chair. The very place where the blood-stained scarf was found, locked from the inside. And yet, you say you do not recall your movements precisely. It is most inconvenient. This lapse of memory, none. Charles stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't like your tone, Poirot. I had nothing to do with my Father's disappearance. If you want to point fingers, look at Blackwood. He's always skulking around, and Father never trusted him with the estate's accounts. Poirot raised an eyebrow but said nothing, allowing Charles's outburst to hang in the air. The young man's agitation was revealing, but Poirot needed more than emotional outbursts to build his case. He excused himself and sought out the maid, Clara, to confirm her account. She was a nervous girl, barely out of her teens, but her story held firm. Charles's room had been empty, his bed untouched. When she passed by after midnight, she also mentioned seeing Beatrice near the library around the same time. Adding another layer of complexity to the night's events, Poirot returned to the library, determined to re-examine the scene. The room was as he had left it, its heavy oak shelves lined with leather-bound books, the air still carrying the faint scent of old paper and wax. The blood-stained scarf had been sent for analysis, but Poirot's attention turned to the secret passage he had discovered behind the hidden panel. He stepped inside, his flashlight casting a narrow beam along the damp stone walls. The passage was narrow, its air thick with the musty smell of disuse. He followed it again to the snowy courtyard, noting that no new footprints had disturbed the ground since his last visit. As he emerged, he caught sight of Beatrice standing near the manor's rear entrance, wrapped in a shawl and staring toward the moors. Her face was pale, her eyes distant. As if lost in thought, Poirot approached quietly, his footsteps muffled by the snow. "Madam Beatrice," he said softly, "you seem troubled. Perhaps you wish to share what weighs on your mind." Beatrice started, her hand clutching the shawl tighter. "Monsieur Poirot, you move like a ghost. I was just thinking about Reginald. This whole affair is tearing the family apart, indeed," Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing. "And yet, I wonder if there is more you know about the night he vanished. You were seen near the library, madam, at a time when others claimed to have been elsewhere. Perhaps you saw something or someone that could shed light on this mystery?" Beatrice's eyes flickered with something fear, perhaps, or guilt. "I couldn't sleep that night," she admitted. "I went to the library to find a book, something to distract me. I didn't see anything unusual, just the scarf lying there on the floor. I thought it was odd, but I didn't touch it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the diamond necklace, madam, the one hidden in Sir Reginald's safe. You recognized it as a family heirloom, stolen years ago. Yet your reaction suggested more than mere recognition. Perhaps you know who took it or why?" Beatrice's lips parted, but no words came. She turned away, her shoulders trembling. "I don't know anything about that," she whispered. "Please, leave me alone." Poirot watched her retreat into the manor, his mind cataloging her reaction. Beatrice was hiding something, but whether it was fear for herself or loyalty to another, he could not yet determine. The necklace, the knife, the scarf, the passage all were threads in a tapestry of betrayal, and Poirot was determined to weave them together. He spent the rest of the morning interviewing the staff, piecing together fragments of the night in question. The cook confirmed that the kitchen knife had been missing since the evening of the disappearance. Notice when she prepared dinner. A footman recalled hearing raised voices from the library before midnight, though he couldn't identify the speakers. The gardener, an elderly man with a penchant for gossip, mentioned seeing Thomas and Beatrice speaking in hushed tones near the stables a few days before Sir Reginald vanished, their heads bent close together like conspirators. This last piece of information sent Poirot back to Thomas's quarters, a small room above the stables. With Thomas occupied elsewhere, Poirot conducted a discreet search, his gloved hands moving swiftly through drawers and shelves. Beneath a loose floorboard, he found a small notebook, its pages filled with cryptic entries, dates, times, and initials that matched those in the blackmail letters found in the briefcase. One entry stood out: CA-10,000, library, midnight. Charles Ashby, Poirot surmised, and a sum of money, perhaps a payment or a debt. linked to the library at the time of the disappearance. Poirot tucked the notebook into his pocket and returned to the manor, his mind racing. The evidence was mounting, but it was still circumstantial. He needed a confession, or at least a slip, to tie the pieces together. He decided to confront Charles again, this time with the weight of his findings. He found Charles in the billiard room, idly knocking balls across the green felt. The young man looked up, his expression wary. "Back again, Poirot, you're late." "A dog with a bone. An apt metaphor, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone calm, but firm. "And this bone. It is a most troubling one. A knife, bloodied, found in the stables. A maid who places you away from your room at the time of your father's disappearance. And now, a notebook with your initials and a sum of money linked to the very night he vanished. You will explain, non." Charles's face drained of color, and he dropped the cue stick, the clatter echoing in the quiet room. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "A notebook? That's nonsense. I told you. I argued with father that night." "But I didn't. I wouldn't," you argued. Poirot interrupted, his voice sharp. "About the estate's finances? Perhaps. Or the will that disinherits you in favor of Beatrice's child. Or perhaps about the blackmail letters that threaten to ruin the Ashby name. You will tell me, Monsieur Charles, or the truth will be extracted in a far less pleasant manner." Charles sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. "All right," he said, his voice breaking. "I argued with him. He was going to cut me out of the will, give everything to Beatrice's child. I was angry, furious. I followed him to the library, and we fought. I grabbed his scarf, pulled at it, but I didn't kill him, I swear. I left him there, alive. I didn't see him again after that." Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying Charles's trembling form. "And the knife, monsieur, the one found in the stables, with blood that may yet prove to be human." "I don't know about any knife," Charles shouted, his voice raw. "I didn't go to the stables that night. I was in the library, then back to my room. You have to believe me." Poirot stepped back, his expression inscrutable. "Belief, monsieur, is earned through evidence, not emotion. We shall see what the blood on the knife reveals. For now, I suggest you remain in the manor. The truth, it is close, and it will not. Be kind to those who hide it." As Poirot left the billiard room, his mind was a whirlwind of deductions. Charles's confession confirmed a struggle, but not necessarily a murder. The knife, the notebook, and Beatrice's evasions pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that might involve Thomas or even Lady Eleanor herself. The day was young, and Poirot knew the next hours would be critical. The stables, the library, the Pondal were pieces of a puzzle that was slowly taking shape, and he would not rest until every piece was in place. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Poirot sent the knife to a local chemist for blood analysis, instructing them to expedite the results. He interviewed more staff, confirming that the kitchen knife had been accessible to anyone in the manor, but no one could pinpoint when it was taken. He revisited the pond, examining the broken ice patch again, but found no new clues. The briefcase with the blackmail letters remained under lock and key in his room, its contents a constant reminder of the scandal that threatened to unravel the Ashby family. By midday, Poirot's thoughts turned to the diamond necklace. Its reappearance, after years of being stolen, suggested a connection to the blackmailer, and Beatrice's reaction hinted at her involvement, whether direct or indirect. He decided to press her further, seeking her out in the conservatory, where she sat among the wilting ferns, her face a mask of quiet despair. "Madame Beatrice," Poirot began, his voice gentle but insistent. "The time for half-truths is past. The necklace, the letters, the knife all point to a secret you are keeping. You knew the thief who took the necklace, non, and perhaps you know what became of Sir Reginald." Beatrice's hands twisted in her lap, her eyes avoiding his. "I told you. I don't know anything about the necklace being stolen. It was my mother-in-law's, a family heirloom. I thought it was lost, not stolen. When I saw it in the safe, I was shocked, but I didn't want to cause more trouble. And the cloaked figure near the pond, Porritt pressed, the one seen by Jim. Was it you, madam, or someone you are protecting? Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. I wasn't at the pond. I swear it. I don't know who Jim saw. Please, Monsieur Porritt, I'm not hiding anything. I just want this to be over. Porritt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, madam. But know this, the truth. It cannot be buried forever. It will surface, like the briefcase in the pond. And when it does, those who have lied will face the consequences. As he left the conservatory, Porritt's mind returned to Thomas Blackwood, the estate manager's connection to the stables, the knife, and the cryptic notebook made him a central figure in the mystery. Porritt decided to follow him discreetly, observing his movements throughout the afternoon. Thomas spent much of the day in the stables, tending to the horses and repairing a broken fence. But his frequent glances toward the manor suggested he was on edge. By late afternoon, the chemist's report arrived, delivered by a breathless messenger. The blood on the knife was human, though the sample was too degraded to identify a specific person. This confirmed Porritt's suspicions. The knife was linked to a violent act, likely tied to Sir Reginald's disappearance. He needed to confront Thomas again, but first, he wanted to examine the notebook more closely. In the privacy of his room, Porritt studied the notebook's entries. The initial CA appeared repeatedly, alongside sums of money and locations. Within the manor library, stables, chapel, one entry, dated the night of the disappearance. Read, CA, meet at stables, 1 a.m. This placed Charles at the stables after his admitted argument with his father, contradicting his earlier claim. But the notebook belonged to Thomas, suggesting he was either involved or tracking Charles's movements for his own reasons. Porritt's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Mortimer, the butler, his face pale. Monsieur Porritt, you must come quickly. There's been an incident in the stables. Porritt followed Mortimer at a brisk pace, his heart pounding with anticipation. As they reached the stables, he saw Thomas kneeling beside a horse, its flank bleeding from a fresh wound. Thomas looked up, his face grim. Someone tried to harm the mare, he said. I found her like this, cut with a knife. I swear it wasn't me. Chapter 8. The hidden motif. The morning after the tumultuous night in the manor, Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small, neat hands folded over his meticulously polished cane, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. The heavy oak shelves loomed above him, their dark wood absorbing the faint light filtering through the tall, frost-etched windows. The air carried the musty scent of old books and the faint tang of ash. From the fireplace, where the burned fragment of a letter still lingered in Poirot's mind, the library, with its locked door and secret passage, had become the epicenter of the mystery at Raven's Inn. And now, as the Yorkshire moors outside lay shrouded in a dense fog, Poirot turned his attention to the human elements of the puzzle: the staff, the family, and the secrets they harbored. The bloodied knife found in the stables had shifted the investigation's focus. Its presence, coupled with the human blood confirmed by Poirot's chemical tests, suggested a violence that could no longer be dismissed as a mere disappearance. Charles Ashby's crumbling alibi, the maid's revelation of his absence during the critical hours, and Beatrice's suspicious behavior in Sir Reginald's room all pointed to a web of motives, tangled with greed, resentment, and hidden loyalties. Yet, Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with the certainty that the truth lay not in the obvious clues, but in the subtle undercurrents of the manor's inhabitants. The staff, often overlooked in such grand households, held the key to unlocking the next layer of the mystery. Poirot summoned the household staff, one by one, beginning with Mortimer, the butler, whose stern demeanor and rigid posture betrayed nothing but a lifetime of disciplined service. The interview took place in the drawing room, where a fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the ornate wallpaper. Mortimer stood before Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, his gray eyes fixed on a point just above the detective's head. "Monsieur Mortimer," Poirot began, his voice smooth and deliberate, "you have served the Ashby family for how many years?" 32, sir," Mortimer replied, his tone clipped. "Since I was a young man. And in all those years, you have observed much, the comings and goings, the tempers, the secrets." Poirot's mustache twitched slightly as he leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with intent. Mortimer's jaw tightened. "I do my duty, Mr. Poirot. I don't pry into family matters. Yet, you see things, do you not? A butler is the eyes and ears of a household. Tell me, what did you see the night Sir Reginald vanished?" Mortimer hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "I was in the pantry, preparing the evening's accounts. I heard nothing unusual until Lady Eleanor called for the search party. And before that, during the family's gathering, did you notice any tension?" Poirot's tone was light, but his gaze was piercing. "There's always tension in a family like this," Mortimer said carefully. "Sir Reginald and Master Charles were arguing earlier that evening, loudly. Something about money, as usual." Poirot nodded, filing the information away. "And Madame Beatrice, did you observe her behavior?" Mortimer's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Beatrice was quiet. She kept to herself, as she often does. I saw her leave the dining room early, claiming a headache. Merci, Monsieur Mortimer. That will be all for now." Poirot dismissed the butler, his mind already turning to the next piece of the puzzle. The next to be interviewed was Eliza, the young maid who had revealed Charles's absence during the critical hours. She entered the drawing room nervously, her hands twisting in her apron, her freckled face pale under Poirot's scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Eliza," Poirot said kindly, gesturing to a chair, "you have been most helpful already. Now, tell me, what else did you see that night? You are in the background, you see what others do not." Eliza swallowed, her eyes darting to the door. I don't like to speak out of turn, sir. Speak freely." "Mademoiselle, the truth is never out of turn." She took a deep breath. "Master Charles wasn't just absent, sir. I saw him near the library, late that night, before the search began. He looked upset, his hands were shaking, and he was muttering to himself." "And did you hear what he said?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. "Something about 'he can't do this to me.' I didn't catch the rest. I was just passing by, tidying the hall." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And Madame Beatrice, did you see her that night?" Eliza hesitated, then nodded. "She was in the corridor, too, sir, near Sir Reginald's room. She had a candle, and she was looking at the door, like she was deciding whether to go in." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured. "And Monsieur Blackwood, the estate manager, where was he?" Eliza's cheeks flushed slightly. "Mr. Blackwood was in the stables, sir. I saw him there when I went to fetch water for the kitchen. He was polishing the rifle, like he always does when he's troubled." Poirot tilted his head, intrigued. "Troubled, you say? And how do you know this, mademoiselle?" Eliza looked down at her hands. "Everyone knows Mr. Blackwood's got a temper, sir. He keeps to himself, but when he's upset, he goes to the stables. It's his way." Poirot thanked Eliza and dismissed her, his mind racing. The maid's observations confirmed his suspicions. Charles, Beatrice, and Thomas Blackwood were all near critical locations during the night of Sir Reginald's disappearance, but it was the staff's gossip, the whispers of those who moved unseen through the manor, that promised to unravel the deeper motives. Next, Poirot sought out the gardener, an elderly man named Amos, whose withered hands and keen eyes suggested a lifetime of observing more than just plants. They met in the greenhouse, where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming roses, a stark contrast to the bleak moors outside. Amos leaned on his spade, his expression wary but cooperative. Monsieur Amos, Poirot began. You know the grounds of Raven's End better than anyone. You see the comings and goings, the shadows that move in the night. Tell me, what have you seen that others have not? Amos scratched his grizzled chin, his eyes narrowing. I don't meddle in family business, sir, but I've seen things, odd things, such as, Poirot prompted, his tone encouraging. Mr. Blackwood and Mrs. Beatrice, Amos said slowly. They've been meeting in secret late at night in the old gazebo by the orchard. I've seen them whispering, looking like they didn't want to be caught. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. And how long have these meetings been occurring? Months, sir. Maybe longer. Started before Sir Reginald's son Mrs. Beatrice's husband passed away. I didn't think much of it at first, but after Sir Reginald went missing, Amos trailed off, shaking his head. And what do you make of it, Monsieur Amos? Poirot asked, his voice low. Amos shrugged. Ain't my place to judge, sir. But Mrs. Beatrice, she's had a hard time with the family. Sir Reginald's son, God rest him, wasn't kind to her. And Mr. Blackwood, well, he's always been loyal to her, not to the Ashbys. Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the implications. Beatrice's strained marriage, Thomas's loyalty, and their secret meetings suggested a motive rooted not just in blackmail, but in personal grievances. The gardener's words painted a picture of a woman trapped in a family that resented her, and a man willing to risk everything to protect her, leaving the greenhouse. Poirot made his way to Thomas Blackwood's quarters, a small room above the stables. The space was Spartan, with a cot, a wooden desk, and a single lantern casting a dim glow. On the desk, Poirot found a notebook, its pages filled with meticulous records of the estate's operations. But tucked between the pages was a folded note written in a hurried hand. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the cryptic message. Meet me at the chapel. Midnight, bring the payment. No tricks. The note was unsigned, but the handwriting matched the style of the blackmail letters found in the submerged briefcase. Poirot's pulse quickened. The chapel, mentioned in the note, was a small, crumbling structure on the edge of the estate, rarely used but steeped in the Ashby family's history. It was the perfect place for a clandestine meeting and the perfect place to trap a blackmailer. Poirot slipped the note into his pocket and returned to the manor, his mind formulating a plan. The coded note suggested Thomas was entangled with the blackmailer, but whether his victim or accomplice remained unclear. The secret meetings with Beatrice, the bloodied knife, and the torn photograph all pointed to a deeper conspiracy, one that Poirot was determined to unravel. That evening, Poirot gathered the family in the drawing room, ostensibly to discuss the progress of the investigation. Lady Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her posture regal but her eyes wary. Charles paced near the fireplace, his hands clenched, while Beatrice sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the floor. Thomas Blackwood stood by the door, his expression unreadable. Miss Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. The disappearance of Sir Reginald is no simple matter. It is a puzzle of motives, of secrets, of betrayals, and I, Hercule Poirot, am close to solving it. Charles stopped pacing, his face pale. What do you mean, Mr. Poirot? Have you found my father? Not yet, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the room. But I have found clues that point to the truth. A bloodied knife, a secret passage, a blackmailer's note, and now I have learned of secret meetings that suggest not all is as it seems within this family. Beatrice's head snapped up, her eyes wide. What are you implying, Mr. Poirot? I imply nothing, Madame Beatrice. I observe. And I observe that you and Monsieur Blackwood have been meeting in secret in the gazebo, in the stables, perhaps elsewhere. Is this not so? The room fell silent, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Thomas stepped forward, his jaw set. I don't know what you're getting at, Mr. Poirot, But I've done nothing wrong. Then why, Monsieur Blackwood, do I find a note in your quarters arranging a meeting with a blackmailer? Poirot produced the note, holding it up for all to see. And why does this note match the handwriting of the letters found in the pond? Thomas's face darkened, but before he could respond, Lady Eleanor spoke, her voice sharp. This is outrageous, Mr. Poirot. You accuse without evidence. Thomas is loyal to this family. Loyal to the family, or to Madame Beatrice? Poirot asked, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. The distinction, I think, is most important. Beatrice stood, her hands trembling. Enough. I won't be accused like this. Yes, Thomas and I have spoken in private, but it's not what you think. We were discussing the estate, trying to protect it from Charles's reckless spending. Charles whirled on her, his face red. Protect the estate? You've been plotting against me, haven't you? You and Blackwood, scheming to take what's mine. Enough. Poirot's voice cut through the argument, sharp and authoritative. The truth will not be found in accusations, but in facts, and the facts, Mzamas. Point to a meeting at the chapel. Tonight, I will go there, and I will find the answers we seek. The family stared at him, a mixture of fear and suspicion in their eyes. Poirot excused himself, his mind already turning to the chapel and the trap he would set. The note, the meetings, the bloodied knife, all were pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. But the final piece, the identity of the blackmailer, and their connection to Sir Reginald's disappearance, remained just out of reach. As night fell, Poirot prepared for the ambush. He enlisted Mortimer, whose loyalty to the family made him a reliable ally, and Amos, whose knowledge of the grounds would prove invaluable. The chapel was a mile from the manor, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. The fog had thickened, cloaking the moors in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Poirot positioned himself behind a crumbling pillar, his cane gripped tightly, his eyes scanning the darkness. Mortimer stood near the entrance, his lantern dimmed. While Amos hid in the shadows of the nearby trees, the clock struck midnight, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. A figure emerged from the fog, cloaked and hooded, moving swiftly toward the chapel. Poirot's heart raced as he recognized the gate. Not Thomas, but someone else. Someone who moved with a purpose that suggested familiarity with the grounds. The figure paused at the chapel door, glancing around, then slipped inside. Poirot signaled to Mortimer, who lit the lantern, casting a beam of light into the chapel. The figure froze, caught in the glow, and Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm, but commanding. Bonsoir, mon ami. You have come to meet the blackmailer, non. But I think, perhaps, you are the blackmailer. The figure turned, and Poirot's eyes widened as the hood fell back, revealing a face he had not expected. The truth, so carefully hidden, was about to unravel, and with it, the final pieces of the mystery at Raven's End. The confrontation in the chapel was brief but intense. The figure, revealed to be a local man named Victor Crane, a former servant dismissed by Sir Reginald years ago, admitted to sending the blackmail letters. His motive was revenge. Sir Reginald had ruined his life by accusing him of theft, a charge that led to his imprisonment. Victor had returned to Raven's Inn, using his knowledge of the estate to extort Sir Reginald. But he swore he hadn't killed him. Then where is Sir Reginald? Poirot demanded, his voice cutting through the fog. Victor's eyes darted nervously. I don't know. I swear it. I was supposed to meet him here, but he never came. I saw Thomas Blackwood lurking around, though. He's the one you should be asking. Poirot's mind raced. Victor's story was plausible, but it didn't explain the bloodied knife or the body that remained unfound. He escorted Victor back to the manor, placing him under Mortimer's watch, and returned to Thomas's quarters, determined to find the coded note's counterpart. In Thomas's desk, Poirot found a second note, this one more detailed, outlining a plan to confront Sir Reginald at the chapel, The handwriting was different, suggesting another hand in the blackmail scheme. Poirot's little gray cells worked furiously, piecing together the connections: Beatrice's affair with Thomas, Charles's financial disputes, Lady Eleanor's control over the family, and now Victor Crane's revenge. The chapter drew to a close as Poirot sat in the library. The coded note spread before him. He began to decode it, his pen moving swiftly across the page, revealing a time and place for another meeting, one that had already passed. The night of Sir Reginald's disappearance. The note confirmed a rendezvous at the chapel, but it also hinted at a betrayal within the family, a motive deeper than blackmail. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming. The truth was close, so close he could almost taste it. The chapel, the notes. The knife all pointed to a conspiracy that had torn the Ashby family apart. Tomorrow, he would set his trap, and the hidden motive behind Sir Reginald's disappearance would be revealed. Chapter 9. The Chapel Confessions. Wind howled across the Yorkshire moors, carrying with it the bite of an early winter. As Hercule Poirot stood in the shadow of Ravensend's ancient chapel, the small, stone structure loomed at the edge of the estate, its weathered spire cutting into the fog like a jagged tooth. The night was thick with mist, the kind that clung to one's clothes and obscured all but the faintest outlines of the world beyond. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, his gloved hands precise, his mustache immaculate despite the damp air. His little, gray cells were alight with anticipation, for tonight, he believed, the truth would begin to unravel. The events of the past days had woven a tapestry of suspicion and deceit. The blood-stained scarf, the secret passage, the footprints that vanished by the frozen pond, the blackmail letters, the poison vial, the stolen necklace, the bloodied knife all pointed to a conspiracy rooted deep within the Ashby family. And now, the coded note found in Thomas Blackwood's quarters had led Poirot to this moment, to this place. The note, written in a simple substitution cipher, had revealed a meeting time: midnight at the chapel. It was a thread, delicate but promising, and Poirot intended to pull it until the entire fabric of lies came apart. He had prepared meticulously. Earlier that evening, he had enlisted the help of Mortimer, the butler, whose stern demeanor belied a loyalty to the truth that Poirot found admirable. Mortimer had been instructed to keep watch from the manor's upper windows, his eyes trained on the chapel's silhouette for any sign of movement. Poirot had also informed the stable boy, young Henry, to remain near the stables, ready to signal if anyone approached from the direction. The boy's earlier sighting of a cloaked figure by the pond had proven his reliability, and Poirot trusted his sharp eyes. The chapel itself was a relic of Ravensend's medieval past, its stone walls etched with centuries of wind and rain. The wooden door creaked as Poirot pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit interior. A single candle flickered on the altar, casting long shadows across the pews. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and old wood, and the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leak in the roof. Poirot's footsteps echoed as he moved to the side of the chapel, positioning himself behind a crumbling pillar where he could observe without being seen. The coded note had been clear. The meeting was to take place at midnight, and Thomas Blackwood was involved. Poirot's suspicions about Thomas had grown since the discovery of the knife in the stables, its blade stained with human blood. Thomas's claim that it was used for hunting had been plausible, but Poirot's tests conducted with the precision of a chemist had confirmed the blood was not animal. The estate manager's guarded demeanor, his secret meetings with Beatrice, and now this coded note all pointed to a man entangled in the mystery of Sir Reginald's disappearance. But was he the blackmailer, the murderer, or merely a pawn? As the chapel's clock struck the first chime of midnight, Poirot's senses sharpened. The fog outside seemed to thicken, muffling the world beyond the chapel's walls. He heard the faint crunch of gravel, a single step, cautious and deliberate. Someone was approaching. Poirot remained still, his eyes fixed on the door. The handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open, admitting a figure cloaked in a dark mantle. The candlelight caught the edge of the hood, revealing nothing of the face beneath. The figure paused, scanning the chapel, then moved toward the altar with purpose. Poirot's heart quickened, but he held his position. The figure reached the altar and knelt, as if in prayer, but their hands moved swiftly, searching beneath the cloth that draped the stone. A soft click echoed in the silence of a hidden compartment. Poirot's curiosity burned, but he waited. Patience, he reminded himself, was the key to unraveling the truth. Then, another sound, the scuff of boots on stone. A second figure entered, this one unmistakable. Thomas Blackwood's broad shoulders filled the doorway, his face partially illuminated by the candle's glow. His expression was tense, his eyes darting nervously. "You're late," he whispered, harshly, addressing the cloaked figure. The figure rose, turning to face Thomas. "I had to be sure," came a muffled reply, the voice low and distorted by the hood. "You have it." Thomas reached into his coat and produced a small envelope. "This is the last of it," he said, his voice strained. "No more demands." This ends tonight. The cloaked figure took the envelope, their movements quick and precise. Poirot strained to see more, but the shadows obscured their features. He considered stepping forward, revealing himself, but something held him back. The little gray cells urged caution. There was more to learn. "You think this clears you?" the cloaked figure said, their tone mocking. "You're in too deep. Blackwood, you've always been." Thomas's face darkened. "I did what I had to. For her. For Beatrice." The figure sneered. "Or for yourself." The mention of Beatrice sent a jolt through Poirot. The estate manager's affair with Sir Reginald's daughter-in-law had been a thread he tugged at before, but this confirmed its significance. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he watched Thomas's reaction. "Don't speak her name," Thomas growled, stepping closer. "You've no right." The cloaked figure laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Rights? You gave those up when you started this game. You think I don't know about the necklace, the letters? You're as guilty as the rest." Poirot's mind raced. The necklace, the diamond heirloom found in Sir Reginald's safe, was tied to the blackmail letters, which had threatened to expose an old scandal. Thomas's involvement suggested he was either the blackmailer or a victim of it. But the cloaked figure's words implied a deeper conspiracy, one that entangled multiple players. Before Poirot could piece together more, the situation escalated. Thomas lunged forward, grabbing the cloaked figure's arm. "Enough," he hissed. "You'll not ruin us." The figure twisted free, surprisingly agile, and darted toward the chapel's side door. Poirot sprang into action, his small frame moving with surprising speed. "Oratez," he called, his voice cutting through the silence. The cloaked figure froze for a moment, startled, then bolted into the fog that Thomas whirled, his face a mask of shock. "Monsieur Poirot, what are you doing here?" Poirot stepped into the candlelight, his eyes sharp. "I am doing what I always do, Monsieur Blackwood, seeking the truth. And you, it seems, have much to explain." Thomas's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. I didn't want this," he said, his voice breaking. "I was trying to protect her." "Protect who?" "Madame Beatrice," Poirot asked, his tone calm, but probing. Thomas nodded, his eyes averted. "She is in danger." "They all are. The letters, they weren't just about Sir Reginald. There's more at stake." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And the cloaked figure? Who are they?" Thomas hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I don't know their name. They contacted me weeks ago, demanding money, threatening to expose everything. Poirot pressed. "You speak of the affair with Madame Beatrice?" Thomas flinched, but nodded. "Yes, and other things. Things from my past." Poirot's mind flickered to the gardener's gossip about Thomas's criminal history, a conviction for theft years ago, before he came to Ravensend. "You were blackmailed over your past. And you paid to keep it hidden." "I had no choice." Thomas said, his voice hoarse. Beatrice, she doesn't know everything. I couldn't let her be hurt. Poirot studied the man, noting the desperation in his eyes, and the knife in the stables. The blood. Thomas paled. I found it there, I swear. I thought it was from hunting. But when you said it was human blood, I didn't know what to think. Poirot nodded. His expression unreadable. Return to the manor, Monsieur Blackwood. Do not speak of this to anyone. I will find your mysterious friend. Thomas hesitated, then nodded, retreating into the fog. Poirot turned his attention to the altar, where the cloaked figure had been searching. He knelt, his gloved fingers probing beneath the cloth. His touch found a small latch, and with a soft click, a compartment opened, revealing a folded photograph. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his breath catching as he saw the image. Beatrice and Thomas, standing close, her hand on his arm. Their expressions intimate the photograph was torn, one corner missing, but it was unmistakable proof of their affair. Poirot slipped the photograph into his pocket, his mind racing. The cloaked figure had escaped, but their presence confirmed a blackmailer at work, someone who knew the secrets of Raven's End and wielded them like a weapon. The photograph suggested Beatrice was a target or a conspirator, and Thomas, caught in the web, was either a protector or a fool. The detective stepped outside, the fog swallowing the chapel behind him. The night was far from over, and the truth, he knew, was still hidden in the shadows. He moved swiftly toward the manor, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The blackmailer's identity was the key, and Poirot suspected they were closer than anyone realized. Back at the manor, Poirot found Mortimer waiting in the hall, his face etched with concern. Did you see them, sir? The butler asked. But they escaped. Poirot replied, tell me. Mortimer, have you noticed anyone acting strangely tonight? Anyone who left the manor? Mortimer frowned, thinking, Miss Beatrice was in the drawing room earlier, but she retired early. Master Charles was in his study, and Lady Eleanor was in her chambers. I didn't see anyone leave, but the fog makes it hard to be certain. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the information, and the staff, all accounted for, sir, except young Henry. Who's at the stables as you asked? Bon. Keep watch, Mortimer. The night is not yet done. Poirot ascended the grand staircase, his steps deliberate. He needed to speak with Beatrice to gauge her reaction to the photograph and Thomas's confession. Her room was at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. He knocked softly, but there was no response. Pushing the door open, he found the room empty, the bed untouched. A chill ran through him. Had Beatrice been the cloaked figure? Or had she fled for another reason? He searched the room, his eyes scanning for clues. On the dressing table, he found a small note written in a hurried hand. Meet me at the pond. Midnight, the handwriting matched the coded note from Thomas's quarters. Poirot's pulse quickened. The pond where the footprints had vanished, where the ice had been broken. Was Beatrice luring someone or being lured? He hurried downstairs, grabbing his coat and scarf. The fog was thicker now, the manor's lights barely piercing the gloom. As he reached the pond, he saw a flicker of movement, a figure, cloaked, standing at the water's edge. Madame Beatrice, he called, his voice steady despite the tension. The figure turned, and the hood fell back, revealing Beatrice's pale face. Her eyes were wide with fear. Monsieur Poirot, I didn't expect you. What are you doing here? Madame, Poirot asked, stepping closer. And why the secrecy? Beatrice's hands trembled. I got a note. It said to come here. That it was about Thomas. I thought he was in trouble. Poirot produced the photograph, holding it up. This was found in the chapel. You and Monsieur Blackwood, explain. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Where did you get that? I thought it was destroyed. Answer the question. Madam, Poirot said, his tone firm. She sank onto a nearby bench, her shoulders shaking. Thomas and we were close. Before my marriage. It was a mistake, but it happened. Someone found out, used it against us. The letters, they started months ago, demanding money, threatening to tell Sir Reginald. And did Sir Reginald know? Poirot asked. Beatrice shook her head. Not about us. But he was being blackmailed, too, over his own secrets. I think that's why he disappeared. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the cloaked figure in the chapel. Was that you? No, Beatrice said, her voice rising. I was in my room until I got the note. I swear it. Poirot studied her, weighing her words. Her fear seemed genuine, but her presence at the pond raised questions. Return to the manor, madam. It is not safe here. Beatrice nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, and hurried back toward the house. Poirot remained by the pond, his gaze fixed on the broken ice. The briefcase found here had contained the blackmail letters, and now Beatrice's story suggested a network of secrets, each one pulling the Ashby family deeper into ruin. The detective's thoughts were interrupted by a shout from the direction of the stables. He ran toward the sound, finding young Henry waving frantically. Monsieur Poirot. I saw them again, the cloaked figure. They went toward the old cellar. Poirot's heart raced. The cellar, beneath the chapel, was a place he hadn't yet explored. He followed Henry, the fog swirling around them. The cellar door was hidden behind a stack of crates, its lock rusted but intact. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. He lit a match, its flame casting eerie shadows on the damp walls dotted at the bottom. He found a small chamber, its floor littered with debris. In the corner, a tarp covered something large. Poirot approached, his pulse steady despite the grim anticipation. He pulled back the tarp, revealing a wooden crate. Inside, wrapped in a blanket, was a body. Sir Reginald Ashby, his face pale, his scarf tied tightly around his neck. Poirot knelt, examining the body. The scarf matched the blood-stained one from the library, confirming it as the murder weapon. Sir Reginald had been strangled, his death deliberate and personal. The cellar, hidden and forgotten, was the perfect place to conceal the crime. The sound of footsteps above snapped Poirot back to the present. He extinguished the match and moved to the shadows, waiting. The cloaked figure descended, their movements cautious. Poirot held his breath, his hand closing around the photograph in his pocket. The figure stopped, sensing something, then turned to flee. None, Poirot called. Stepping forward, you will not escape again. The figure hesitated, then threw back their hood, revealing a face Poirot had not expected. Charles Ashby. His eyes were wild, his hands trembling. You don't understand, Poirot. I had to protect the family. Protect, Poirot said, his voice cold. By murdering your father. Charles's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen. He was going to ruin us, expose everything. The affair, the debts, the wolf. I couldn't let him destroy our name. Poirot's mind clicked into place. The scratch on Charles's hand, his nervous demeanor, his absence during the disappearance all pointed to his guilt. But the cloaked figure's agility, the blackmail letters, the coded note, there was another hand at work. Someone manipulating Charles. Tell me, Monsieur Charles, Poirot said. Who gave you the note? Who told you to meet here? Charles shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I don't know. They left it in my study. Said it would end everything. I thought it was Thomas. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the photograph, the blackmail. Charles sank to his knees. I found out about Beatrice and Thomas. I used it, yes, to keep them in line. But the letters, someone else was pulling the strings. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low. And your mother, Lady Eleanor, did she know? Charles froze, his eyes wide. Mother, she suspected. She told me to handle it, to protect the family. But I didn't think. Poirot's little gray cells hummed. Lady Eleanor's control, her subtle gestures, her knowledge of the affair, it all pointed to a deeper motive. Had she orchestrated the blackmail, using Charles as her tool? Or was she, too, a victim of the mysterious figure? The sound of footsteps returned, heavier this time. Mortimer appeared at the cellar door, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, lady. Eleanor is gone. Her room is empty. Her coat missing." Poirot's heart sank. The pieces were falling into place, but the final thread remained elusive. "Find her, Mortimer," he said. "She holds the key to this tragedy." As Mortimer rushed off, Poirot turned back to Charles. "You will come with me, monsieur. The truth will be revealed, and justice will be served." The fog seemed to close in as they emerged from the cellar, the chapel spire a faint shadow. Above, Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of deductions, each clue a piece of the puzzle. Lady Eleanor, Charles, Beatrice, Thomas, the cloaked figure, all were bound by secrets, by betrayal. But the true mastermind, he suspected, was still out there, hidden in the mist. The night stretched on, and Poirot knew the final revelation was near. He would gather the family, confront them with the evidence, and expose the heart of the betrayal at Raven's End. The truth, as always, would not escape Hercule Poirot. Chapter 10. The final revelations. Wind howled across the Yorkshire moors, rattling the ancient windows of Raven's End Manor as Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small, precise figure commanding the attention of the gathered household. The air was thick with tension, the fire in the hearth casting flickering shadows across the faces of Lady Eleanor Ashby, her son Charles, Beatrice Ashby, and Thomas Blackwood, the estate manager. The staff lingered at the edges, their whispers silenced by Poirot's piercing gaze. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, his mustache impeccably trimmed, and began to speak in his measured, deliberate tone. "Mzamas," he said, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence, "we have reached the denouement of this most tragic affair. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Ashby has revealed a tapestry of secrets, woven with threads of greed, betrayal, and misplaced loyalty. But now, the truth, it emerges, as it always must when Hercule Poirot applies his little gray cells." The family exchanged uneasy glances, each face a mask of apprehension. Charles's hand, still bearing the faint scratch Poirot had noted on his first day, twitched nervously. Beatrice clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting toward Thomas, who stood rigid, his jaw set. Lady Eleanor, regal and composed, met Poirot's gaze with a defiant tilt of her chin. Though a flicker of unease passed through her sharp eyes, Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the polished oak floor. "Let us begin with the facts. Sir Reginald Ashby, a man of wealth and influence, vanished during a family gathering. A blood-stained scarf found in the library suggested foul play. The room, locked from the inside, pointed to a culprit within these walls. And yet, the clues, oh, how they multiplied. A secret passage, footprints in the snow, a submerged briefcase, blackmail letters, a stolen necklace, a bloodied knife, and a coded note, each a piece of the puzzle, each leading us closer to the truth." He paused, turning to face the family. "But the truth, it is not found in the clues alone. It is found in the hearts of those who hide their motives. Let us reconstruct the events, step by step, to uncover the one who believed they could outwit Hercule Poirot." The night of the disappearance, Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes narrowing. The night Sir Reginald vanished, the family dined together. An argument, heated and bitter, erupted between Sir Reginald and his son, Charles, over the estate's finances. "Charles, you claim the scratch on your hand came from a gardening mishap, but your nervous demeanor betrayed you. The truth, it is more complicated." Nest pause. Charles shifted uncomfortably, his face paling. "I told you, I argued with father, but I didn't harm him. I swear it." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, Monsieur Charles. We shall return to you. For now, let us consider the library, where the scarf was found. A room locked from within, with no signs of forced entry. This suggested the culprit was someone with access to the manor's secrets. The discovery of a hidden panel leading to a passage confirmed this. The passage led to the courtyard, where footprints in the snow ended near a frozen pond. A curious detail. 9. The footprints stopped abruptly, as if the person had vanished or doubled back. He turned to Thomas Blackwood. "Monsieur Blackwood, you were seen near the stables, polishing a rifle. You claimed to be alone, but a stable boy reported a cloaked figure near the pond." And then, the pond itself, it revealed a briefcase containing letters that exposed Sir Reginald's scandalous affair. Blackmail, a powerful motive, was at play. But who was the blackmailer? And what did they seek? Thomas's eyes darkened, but he remained silent. Poirot continued, undeterred. The letters pointed to a scandal that threatened the Ashby legacy. "Lady Eleanor, you admitted to knowing of the affair, but dismissed its relevance. Yet, your composure, it hides much. Beatrice, your unease when the affair was mentioned suggested you, too, knew more than you revealed. And Charles, your agitation over the letters claiming they were forgeries hinted at your fear of their consequences." The web of motive Poirot's gaze swept the room. The investigation deepened. A hidden will, discovered in Sir Reginald's papers, revealed that Charles was to be disinherited in favor of Beatrice's unborn child. A powerful motive for Charles, perhaps, to act against his father. But there was more. A vial of poison, found in Sir Reginald's guest room, suggested a deliberate act. A diamond necklace, stolen years ago, reappeared in a hidden safe linked to the blackmail letters, and a bloodied knife found in the stables bore traces of human blood, matching a set from the manor's kitchen. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Each clue pointed to a different suspect. Charles, with his argument and scratch. Beatrice, with her knowledge of the necklace and her search of Sir Reginald's room. Thomas, with his secret meetings and coded note, and Lady Eleanor, whose subtle gestures of control betrayed a deeper involvement. But which of you crossed the line from motive to murder? Poirot's eyes gleamed as he continued. The coded note, found in Thomas's quarters, revealed a meeting at the chapel. There, I set an ambush, catching Thomas with a mysterious figure who escaped into the fog. Thomas confessed to being blackmailed over his past as a convicted thief, claiming he acted to protect Beatrice. A torn photograph showing Beatrice and Thomas together confirmed their affair. But this was not the end of the trail. The discovery. In the cellar, Poirot's voice grew grave. "This morning, I ordered a search of the chapel, prompted by a faint clue, a scuff mark on the floor, unnoticed by all but Poirot. Beneath the chapel, in a hidden cellar, we found the body of Sir Reginald Ashby, strangled with his own scarf. The fibers on his clothing, the angle of the marks, and the state of the body told a story of calculated violence, not a crime of passion." Gasps filled the room. Beatrice stifled a sob, while Charles's face drained of color. Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on her cane, but her expression remained unreadable. Thomas looked away, his fists clenched. Poirot continued, relentless. The scarf, it was the key. The blood on it was Sir Reginald's, but the manner of its use tightly knotted, with precision suggested a mind both calm and ruthless. The cellar, accessible only through a hidden trapdoor, was known to few. The key to this trapdoor I found in the possession of one person in this room. He produced a small, ornate key, holding it aloft. This key, concealed in a jewelry box, unlocks the cellar, and the fibers on Sir Reginald's body match a shawl worn by only one person here. All eyes turned to Lady Eleanor, whose face remained a mask of icy calm. Poirot stepped closer to her. "Lady Eleanor Ashby, it is you who orchestrated this tragedy. You killed Sir Reginald to protect the family's legacy, believing his affair, if revealed, would ruin Charles's inheritance and tarnish the Ashby name. You forged the blackmail letters to divert suspicion, planting them in the briefcase to implicate another. You use the secret passage to move his body to the cellar, locking it with this key. And the shawl left its mark on the crime. Eleanor's eyes flashed with defiance. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. These are mere conjectures. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but the proof, it is meticulous. The fibers, analyzed by my friend in London, match your shawl precisely. The key, found in your jewelry box, bears your initials and the forged letters written in your hand with ink from your private desk betray your attempt to mislead. You believe you could outwit Poirot, but the truth, it is relentless. The confession room fell silent, the crackling fire the only sound. Lady Eleanor's composure cracked, her shoulders sagging. Very well, she said, her voice low but steady. I did it. Reginald was a fool, threatening to expose his affair, to drag our name through the mud. Charles's future, the estate, all we had built it would have been lost. I acted to protect my family, to preserve our legacy. I lured him to the library, drugged his wine to weaken him, and used the scarf to end his life. I hid him in the cellar, believing no one would find him. She straightened, her pride unbroken. I regret nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I did what was necessary. Charles staggered back, his voice breaking. Mother, how could you? Beatrice reached for his hand, tears streaming down her face. Thomas remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot's expression softened, though his voice remained firm. Madam, your loyalty to your family, it is admirable, but it has twisted into betrayal. The law, it does not forgive such acts. No matter the motive, you have brought tragedy upon those you sought to protect. The aftermath is the police, summoned by Poirot's earlier message, entered to arrest Lady Eleanor. The room erupted in quiet chaos. Charles and Beatrice clung to each other, their grief and shock palpable. Thomas, his role in the affair exposed, slipped away to speak with the officers, offering his cooperation. The staff, shaken, dispersed to their duties, whispering of the scandal that would echo through Ravens End for years. Poirot stood by the window, gazing out at the snow-covered moors. The case was closed, the truth revealed, but the weight of it lingered. He thought of Eleanor's pride, her fierce devotion to her family, and how it had led to such a tragic end. The human heart, he murmured to himself, it is a labyrinth, full of shadows and secrets, and yet the truth, it always finds its way.